you catch. It's not that hard, okay? All right, get the out of here.
I'm going to talk a lot about drills and fundamentals.
Watch it, watch it, watch it, watch it.
On 93.5.
Watch it.
And 107.5.
Boom, baby.
The Fan.
And a good Wednesday morning. Kevin Bowe and Jake Query and Mark Dykton. It is supposed to be a really nice day from a temperature standpoint. You know, I was driving down to Bloomington after the show yesterday to teach my class, and all of a sudden I'm looking over the JW Marriott and half the Indy 500 decal going up, and I'm like, you know what? These are the signs of May right now. These are the signs of May.
Let's go.
Doug
Literally
Bowles,
the signs of May.
Literally, yes. Very good point, Mark Dykton. Doug Bowles was out front doing a little pressing, and when you see that sign, you feel the weather that we're going to have today. And then, Jake, if I'm not mistaken, right? Cars on the track tomorrow out there?
Correct. Tomorrow and Friday, open test. Now, the weather's going to be a little dicey on those days, but we are carrying them. IndyCar.com, where you can follow along on who's doing what on the racetrack. So look forward to being out there tomorrow and again on Friday. I'm also, shameless plug, videotaping tomorrow with our digital team for another year of Beyond. Well, I
nice.
guess the Gold Badge, we called it. The Gold Badge.
That was great last year. Any tease of where we can potentially see you?
You know, last year what we did was just kind of took people around the inside of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, places that you'd probably seen but not really understood exactly what they were. This time I figured what we would do is turn back the calendar even further and take you through exactly when you're at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where exactly would you have been if you were at that spot in 1908? How did that track come about? So we're going to give you a little behind the scenes of where it all came together.
I like that. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago.
And then after that, next year, we're out of ideas.
when the Masters was underway a few weeks ago, I always like to see, you know, how the course has evolved, how the property has evolved over the years, those kind of overhead shots of, hey, this is what it looked like in 46, and this is how it looks present day. So inching closer to the month of May, get an oval test Thursday and Friday out there. The Barber race to close out the month, and then the month of May obviously arrives in earnest. We're going to have Alan Karpick here early in the, 7:45 mark? He's our typical, not afraid to wake up with us. Some Zach Edey news yesterday and declaring for the NBA Draft, so we'll chat about that with him. Stephen Holder coming up at 8 o'clock. We haven't done it yet, but I think it's good to squeeze in considering the Pacers do have a pick somewhere in the lottery. We'll find out the exact position of that next month, but Krysten Peek is going to join us to talk a little NBA draft with us to close out the show on this Wednesday.
You know, Krysten Peek, we were talking about it yesterday, Mark. She's the very talented writer that when we had her on one of the first times, her dog was barking, and she yelled at her dog, which was fun, right? And so you and I were trying to figure out the dog's name. It hit me as soon as we walked out of here. Isn't it Gary?
Maybe. I think that sounds right.
I think Gary's. Right. I think Gary's the name of her dog.
Miller Kopp's dog was Ivy.
That's right. 2-syllable dog names are the best because you can accentuate it a little bit.
Last night we went for a walk after dinner, and we had a neighbor with a dog named Belle barking ferociously at us.
Probably a different Belle, but when I was a kid growing up, there was a Belle across the street. Belle belonged to the Lurtons, was a Bouvier. What kind of dog was this Belle?
Belle was like a little poodle mix. A lot of energy for Belle late last night. So Krysten Peek from Yahoo Sports going to join us to close out the show from an NBA draft standpoint. Again, 8 days away from the NFL draft. We'll talk with Stephen Holder about that coming up in a bit. But Jake, the big news yesterday, certainly Zach Edey declaring for the NBA draft. Do you view this as might as well get intel, test the waters, take part in the combine, experience all of that, and then return to school? Or do you look at this as Purdue fans are going to be worrying here for the next month and a half?
No, I think that, he made it pretty clear. I'm testing the waters to see. You might as well go through the process, right? You find out where you would slot, how, what range you're looking at, how much money you're looking at, for that matter. And, he did say, I'm leaving the door open to return. So I think that Purdue fans knew that this was, you do see guys that declare, Kevin, that will say, I am entering my name in the NBA draft and, thank you for the memories. He basically said, if I have to stay in college, I'd rather do it nowhere else than Purdue, but I owe it to myself to test and see exactly where I might slot. Now, I do think that he is probably a 35 to 50 player. I think that his ceiling probably, in other words, I don't know that he's a guy that through the workouts and in the process and everything else is going to elevate his status, only because people know exactly what he can do, and it's just a matter of where his game fits in the modern NBA. But he does have a really nice touch, obviously. He's a good passer. I mean, he does a lot of things that there is a place for him in the NBA. I just don't know that it's a place that you would spend a top 20 pick on. And so I think he's got a pretty good idea of where he's going to slot. And, I don't know. Then it comes down to, Kevin, whether or not he's thinking to himself, does Zach Edey have a definitive, is there a place in the draft that he has to be in order to stay in the draft?
Yeah, what does he need to hear?
Correct. Or does he just need to hear that he is going to be selected in the first or second round? If that's the case, then, it's going to be tough. But Purdue's got some players coming in. Obviously not one of his caliber at the center position necessarily, but they've got some athletes coming in, and they have some good pieces coming back. The one thing I will say, if he were to leave, is, and he's been a wonderful player, but, I do think that they have some players at that position that have shown that they've got skill sets that can kind of pick it up by committee if their roles are elevated. I think Caleb Furst is a really good player. I think Kaufman Wren's a good player. So they can get by, but you would obviously rather have him than not.
Yeah, we had Greg Doyle on yesterday, and I was a bit stunned when Greg said that he thinks Purdue would be a top 10 team without Zach Edey. I think that's discrediting Edey way too much. Purdue wasn't hitting wide open threes with Zach Edey. They obviously aren't going to get as clean of looks without him. I'm not acting like Purdue would fall off a cliff without Edey, but I don't think they would be, or they should be viewed in that light if he were to leave. I am so intrigued by what Zach Edey will look like at the next level whenever that happens.
7'3" and then black hair.
How effective he will be in the NBA.
I totally agree.
He is such a unique prospect. Obviously the NBA rules don't necessarily cater to a 7'4" big man just camping out in the lane defensively, because there's a defensive 3 seconds that you don't have in college. You could probably look at it a couple of ways, Jake. High-end optimism on Zach Edey at the next level is the guy's played basketball for, 5 years? And he's already this good.
You know who I would liken him to? Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez is a really good player from Milwaukee. On nights when other pieces are not necessarily either on or available, Brook Lopez is certainly capable at the NBA player, or at the NBA level, of giving you 28 and 10.
Yeah, but Lopez's ability to shoot is just a huge outlier.
Understood.
From Edey.
He can shoot on the outside. There's no doubt. But they slow things down a little bit and utilize him, and he can play defense a little bit. Now, we don't know, because he hasn't been asked to do it, how good an outside shot Edey has. I'm not saying he's a three-point shooter like Lopez. Don't get me wrong. But to your point, Kevin, if you look at how well he has developed in the limited time he's played basketball, who's to say he can't develop an outside shot?
He's got a really nice looking stroke from the foul line. I know Jim Jackson said this quite often whenever he's on Purdue games of, when you watch Edey's form, it reminds Jimmy Jackson. I'm not sure if he played with Yao specifically, but it kind of reminds him a bit of Yao. So again, that would be interesting to see if Edey ever tried to go there from a perimeter standpoint. But if you look at the NBA, just this past season, Paolo Banchero was the NBA Rookie of the Year. One of the finalists for Rookie of the Year was Walker Kessler. And I think it was Walker Kessler shot 3 threes in 1,700 minutes. So it's not like a absolute must that Zach Edey has to do that. Again, Walker Kessler probably a little bit of a better athlete, just kind of laterally if and when you do need to switch. But I'm very curious, and we don't know this, but I'm very curious again, what does Zach Edey need to hear to go to the NBA? Because, Jake, going back to school, what would be the reasons to go back to school? Become Purdue's all-time leading scorer? Have more team success? I don't think any way he goes back to school necessarily improves his NBA stock. I think you run the risk of injury more than anything if you go back to school.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, if you have now NIL money is probably going to be there for him to the level of NBA money. I have no idea. Doubtful.
Yeah, I would guess no.
The difference being NBA money, if you're a first rounder, which he's not going to be probably, but if you are, then you're talking guaranteed money as opposed to just 1 year money. I mean, there's a lot to weigh into it. Here's the thing I'm looking at that has him comparison of, a bigger Zubac with a little Yao Ming and with less size and mobility.
Boban
as well, yeah. Again, I think that sells him a little bit short because those guys. The thing about Edey, and I've always said this about Rick Smits, you guys have heard me say it a million times. When Rick Smits first came into the league, you could see the gears turning in his head. It wasn't instinctive. Once it became instinctive, he was a really good offensive player. And in Zach Edey's case, it does look instinctive. Like he doesn't have to stop and think about what he's going to do, and he's got a very good touch and idea of where he is around the basket all the time.
He's got a great touch.
Yeah.
He's got a great touch. And I remember when Marquette played them earlier in the year, and Shaka Smart had plenty of praise for Zach Edey afterwards, in that, the thing that impressed Shaka the most was usually with big guys, you've got to ramp them up. You're begging them for energy. You're begging them to play on both ends of the floor, full motor at a high level. That is not a worry with Edey. Stamina was great all season long. He didn't get into foul trouble much. All of those things. Matt Painter was on with JMV yesterday, just in typical Painter fashion. Outstanding interview on a variety of topics. Here was the snippet, though. Painter's thoughts on Zach Edey declaring for the draft.
He's still, trying to gather a lot of facts and kind of figure out where he stands with everything. I just want him to do what's best for him. I think a lot of people always look at it like the head coach is just trying to convince you to come back. And, I look at it like I wish I was in his position. And, I just want, for him to make the best decision for himself, gather all the facts and make that decision, and then support him in whatever he does. If he decides to go the NBA, support him. If he comes back to Purdue, support him. Like just continue to help your players, continue to want what's best for them.
Painter seemed pretty confident from an NIL standpoint that they had some things in place for Zach Edey if he does indeed come back. May 16th, NBA Draft Combine. May 31st is the date that he would have to, that's the deadline for withdrawing his name from the draft and returning to Purdue. I think about this last year, Jake, and I could be off base on this, but I feel like there are some people out there that, and maybe Trayce Jackson-Davis is one of them. Remember that Trayce Jackson-Davis, he got COVID right before the start of the NBA Combine?
Yeah.
And that pretty much ended his, testing of the waters, if you will. And I think Trayce himself has said that if he had not gotten COVID and participated in the Combine, there's a good chance he just would have gone into the NBA. And again, I know it's not the exact same situation, but I think there are some similarities between Trayce and Zach Edey. So I'll be really interested from a Combine standpoint how Edey looks in those 5-on-5 settings with more NBA rules, obviously away from his Purdue team that's so centric around him. If it goes well, does that push him into round one, get him to leave, or does he get exposed a bit and perhaps decides to go back?
He would need, by the way, if Purdue were to play 35 more games next year, which is what they played this year, right? If he were to return and they were to play the same schedule basically over again, he would need to average 22.5 per game to become the all-time leading scorer in Purdue history.
And that's Mount?
Correct.
He probably will, I would guess, shatter Joe Barry Carroll in the rebounds.
Joe barely cares, baby. Joe barely cares.
So those are some of the things that Zach Edey can look at. Again, Alan Karpick going to join us here in about a half hour to talk more about this. NBA last night, all the home teams won. I don't think anything was too climactic.
Yeah, you're right. They were kind of, okay, I checked in and saw the score and didn't need to necessarily lock in, right?
Cavs even up the series 1-1 with the Knicks. Suns even it up with the Clippers. The big news late last night, Draymond Green suspended for Game 3. That will be Thursday night in Golden State. Jake, I understand the reputation of Draymond Green. I'm a little surprised by this. I find it ironic that a member of the Bad Boys, and Joe Dumars is the one that hands down this sort of suspension with his role in the league office. And I would like to think that a move like this could quiet the crowd that says, oh, the NBA just favors the big market teams.
Yeah.
They want to do anything to put their stars in the finals. This is a huge deal for the Kings in trying to go up 3-0.
Here's what I've never understood. When people say big market, well, they're like, what teams define big market? In the NFL, NBA, whatever it might be, NBA, for example, I hear people say like, well, that team got screwed because they're a small market team. And I'm like, are they? Like, I heard someone refer to Dallas as a small market team. I'm like, are they? What do we list? And I don't know the answer to this. I'm asking rhetorically. What is the line between big market and small market? I mean, is Houston a big market team? It's the third biggest city in the country.
I think probably a lot of it depends on like just your general ownership and the willingness of that owner to pay. From an NBA standpoint, luxury tax. From an NFL standpoint, I think it's starting to grow a little bit. And, are you willing to shell out a little bit of cash up front? There are other owners around the league that are. I wouldn't say Jim Irsay is one of those. So,
yeah, the NFL, you have to get creative a little bit, Kevin. In reality, the NFL is set up, and I promise it's 7:16 on a beautiful Wednesday morning. We got a good show lined up. I got a good night's sleep. Got in here this morning feeling good, so I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole of my angst on this. But I'm old enough to remember when Bill Polian was saying for the Colts that they were at a competitive disadvantage playing in the RCA Dome because of the small market nature to it and how challenging that was for them. And I'm like, except for that you play in a league with a salary cap and revenue sharing. So realistically, the profit margin is essentially the same all the way across the board. Now, your auxiliary sponsorships, suite sales, I get all that. But there's only so many places you can spend it in salary. That's changed a little bit, Kevin, because teams like the Rams have gotten creative, right, and found loopholes they can do to entice especially free agent players. I get that. But the Rams are kind of the anomaly, and it kind of blew up on them in a way, and I remember you and I talking about this literally the day after the Rams won the Super Bowl. We're like, they got their ring, and now for like the next 2 or 3 years, they're probably going to pay for it because all the bills are going to start coming in, right?
Were you surprised, Draymond suspended for Game 3, or
I was a little bit, only because
here's class clown trying to get by for the 13th time?
Well, that's it. If that exact thing had happened, I truly believe this. When I was a kid, I was a diehard IU basketball fan. I thought Gene Cady was a lunatic on the sidelines. Always like, you've seen the Gene Cady, very intense. And I remember saying to my dad when I was like 10, I'm like, why is it that whenever the Indiana basketball coach gets in trouble, Dad, it's big news, but whenever the Purdue coach does, like nobody talks about it. And he acts, why doesn't he ever get in trouble? And my dad said, well, Jake, eventually you'd build for yourself what's called a reputation, and you have to live up or deal with the repercussions of that reputation. And when you've gotten 8 violations, your 9th one is going to look, even if it's the same thing that was done wrong by somebody on their second offense, it's going to be treated differently. I've never forgotten that, and Draymond Green is in that category. Kevin, if that had been last night, or not last night, but 2 nights ago, if it was any other, Jordan Poole, if it was whoever that did that, they probably get fined. But with Draymond Green, it's like at some point you're like, is this guy ever going to learn his lesson on the decorum of how he has to act?
Well, the other thing too, Jake, is, and again, this might be Sacramento playing a little gamesmanship. For what it's worth, Domantas Sabonis is listed as questionable for Game 3 with a sternum issue. If Sabonis is going to miss that game for some reason, there's no way Green could play in that game. That's a good call. Now, again, that might be the Kings playing a little gamesmanship. And Brian points this out. I think it's a really good point to make. Adam Silver was in the building for Game 2, and we all watched how Draymond Green reacted as they were reviewing said play. He certainly didn't just sit on the bench in a remorseful manner.
Correct.
He certainly had his way with the Sacramento
Kevin,
things.
the reality is this. It comes down to this, simply this. If a guy gets a speeding ticket every week for a calendar year, and at the end of the year he has 52 speeding tickets, and the judge says to him, if you get more speeding tickets in a calendar year than than the numbers of once per week allows, I'm taking away your license. And 3 days before the end of the year, he gets caught going 42 and a 35 and gets a speeding ticket. He can tell all of his friends that he got his license suspended for going 42 and a 35. And technically he's correct. But those that know the story know it's because he got his 53rd speeding ticket. It just depends on which prism you want to look through.
And the NBA made it very clear in the statement last night that it was based in part of Green's history. That contributed significantly to this news. So Game 3 for the Warriors not until tomorrow night. Again, they are down 2-0 for the first time in 27 straight playoff series. Tonight we'll have 3 games on the slate. It'll be the Lakers trying to go up 2-0 on the road. We'll see about Ja Morant. Doesn't sound too optimistic on that one. Grizzlies and Lakers. Bucks and Heat. Giannis, I thought I saw he was listed as doubtful.
I think that's right.
For Game 2 here as the Bucks try and even up that series. So Chris Middleton, who's battled injuries all season long, we'll see if he can be kind of the lead guy. Obviously, Drew Holiday. And then the Nuggets and T-Wolves also tonight.
I really want to see the Kings win it all. I'm all in on the Kings.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
The Pacers of the West. Going back to the Cincinnati Royals days, Oscar Robertson.
Yeah, I don't really know who I'd be rooting for in the East.
Got to go with the Bucks, right? Yeah, I know they've won it.
It's an element of just kind of seeing them do it already.
I get it.
What about Cleveland?
Yeah, Cleveland's an interesting story because they were basically scaled all the way down, and boy, did they quickly rebuild, right? And they've got some good young players.
Karis LeVert was great for him last night. Darius Garland
Darius Garland's a really good player, yeah.
Donovan Mitchell kind of more of a facilitator. They smacked the Knicks to even up that series. That has the feel of a series that will go all 7 games. Again, the Celtics won the opener last night, and the Suns won the finale to even up that at 1-1.
The Giannis driving around Chick-fil-A with the championship trophy was pretty cool, though. It'd be fun to do. If he does that again, I'm driving to Milwaukee to.
Yeah, Giannis is a pretty likable star.
For sure. Absolutely, for sure.
God,
Mark Dykton in the Checkdown probably is queuing up his favorite soundbite. I'm assuming.
Of course.
Yesterday was all about Hunter Green. This sums up the Reds and their rebuild. Jeff Passan, the Adrian Wojnarowski, Adam Schefter of Major League Baseball.
Did you say the aging Wojnarowski?
Adrian.
Okay.
The Reds signed Hunter Green, their young star pitcher, to a 6-year extension yesterday. He is the first player on the Reds roster to have a guaranteed salary past this season.
You know what they said after he signed that deal?
Well, where are you going to go?
Think about that. How many players on a major league roster? 30-something? Pitchers, batters, and he's the first player to have a contract guaranteed past this season. What says you are more in a tank rebuild than that?
But here's the thing. A tank rebuild for what? For who? You know what I mean?
Maybe the kid from Franklin, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Get Max Clark to
Yeah,
head
but
over to
baseball
Cincinnati.
is so crazy because it's not like you draft somebody and he's an instant impact. You might not see him for like 5 years.
Well, we've talked about it before. I don't think there's a draft that's more, and again, it's not like I pay attention to it, but that's more of a crapshoot.
By the 5th pick, you're like, who's this guy?
/ interesting than Major League Baseball.
Usually by the first pick, you're like, who's this guy?
Yeah, exactly. From some pitcher from somewhere in Arizona,
He's in the
high school
Cobb
kid.
League of Georgia, right. And we're going to draft him versus the 3-year player at Vanderbilt. Yeah, the Rays absolutely smoked the Reds, and I did see my A's continue their charitable act.
That's right.
Appreciated it.
We'll get everybody caught up on what happened last night in the world of sports when we do the morning checkdown. Alan Karpick going to join us just 20 minutes from now. We'll talk a little bit of Purdue, and then Stephen Holder. We'll talk NBA draft as well. Loaded show here on a Wednesday and a good-looking start to the day. Good morning to you. It's Kevin and Corey, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Are you going to abandon being a Reds fan? Are you going to abandon following this team?
Reds stink.
The Ride.
Spring event starting Friday. Get details at diamondsdirect.com.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
All right, last night in the NBA, all the home teams got it done. You have the Celtics over the Hawks to go up 2-0. Cleveland, even their series with the Knicks. Karis LeVert, outstanding off the bench in that one. By the way, Malcolm Brogdon, pretty good for the Celtics, so a couple former Pacers there. And then the Suns, in the final game of the night, they even things up with the Clippers 1-1. Looking ahead to tonight, you've got the Lakers and the Grizzlies, the Bucks, with Giannis very much in doubt for that one. Already down 1-0 to the Heat. And then the Nuggets and the T-Wolves, and Draymond Green suspended for tomorrow night's Game 3.
Major League Baseball yesterday, it was the Diamondbacks 8-7 over the St. Louis Cardinals. Another win for Mark Dykton. Tigers sweeping the Cleveland Guardians in the Midwest. The Tampa Rays 10. Your Cincinnati Redlegs.
Are you going to abandon being a Reds fan? Are you going to abandon following this team?
Yeah, this feeds right into that clip. Did you see? I think it was I guess it would have been the Monday night game. Lowest announced crowd in the 19-year history of Great American Ballpark.
Boy, how many?
I don't know the official number on that, but now to be fair, I guess a little bit of the Tampa Bay Rays has something to do with it, just because typically the Reds are very reliant on a somewhat of a road crowd, which is not ideal. But yeah. Not good right now. And the Reds are actually halfway decent.
Yeah, I was going to say, they have not been a complete embarrassment.
They aren't the A's.
Yet, right?
The A's have been outdrawn by all of their minor league affiliates at one point this season.
Who have?
The Athletics.
That's good.
Their minor league roster or minor league teams have outdrawn them attendance-wise at least once.
They were beaten yesterday by the Cubs 4-0. Cute fellow 1-0 over the Washington Nationals. And the Indianapolis Indians on the short end against the Memphis Redbirds 5-4. One sport we haven't talked much about, probably should mention it because it's that time of year. Rangers over the Devils last night, 5-1 in the NHL. That's the first round of the East playoffs. Rangers lead 1-0. It was Lightning over the Maple Leafs, 7-3. Tampa also up 1-0. These are all game ones, by the way. Winnipeg over Vegas, and the Seattle. Do you guys say the Kraken, the Kraken, the Kraken?
Well, the Kraken. Yeah, the Kraken. That'd be the pronunciation.
I always think of it as Kraken.
Well,
but I know it.
Kraken.
But then I look at it, and for some reason, my eyes see Karen.
Oh.
It's just like a bunch of angry ladies in the crowd. 3-1 over the Avalanche, Seattle.
Indy Fuel, they start their playoffs coming up this Friday on the road early with Toledo next Tuesday and Thursday, I believe, games 3 and 4, so you can check that out up at the Coliseum.
Can I do it one time? Let's go Fuel. You've been to the games, right?
Yep.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Mark's looking at me like I'm crazy.
Great
time.
Well,
that's my usual glance.
Par for the course at 7:34. Zach Edey declaring for the NBA draft, maintaining, though, the potential to come back to Purdue. Here was Matt Painter yesterday on Edey making that move.
He's still, trying to gather a lot of facts and kind of figure out where he stands with everything. I just want him to do what's best for him. I think a lot of people always look at it like the head coach is just trying to convince you to come back. And, I look at it like I wish I was in his position. And, I just want, for him to make the best decision for himself, gather all the facts and make that decision, and then support him in whatever he does. If he decides to go to the NBA, support him. If he comes back to Purdue, support him. Like just continue to help your players, continue to want what's best for them.
That was Matt Painter on yesterday with JMV, by the way, yesterday afternoon. Painter also said he hasn't watched a lot of the Fairleigh Dickinson game yet.
I don't think he's watching it.
He hasn't watched it.
Yeah, I don't think he's watched it at all. Mr. Basketball announcement tonight. The banquet is tonight. Sounds like Marcus Burton from Penn, the heavy favorite in that one. He is headed to play for Micah Shrewsbury, Notre Dame. Jake, I know we looked this up. The last South Bend native to win Mr. Basketball?
Boy, Jerron Cornell did not win it, right? I'm not actually positive on that.
I remember we looked this up. I think we had to go way back.
Wasn't Lee Nailon from South Bend?
He was, yeah.
But he was not Mr. Basketball, I realized, but he was a really good player.
TCU.
Yeah.
You have some Michigan City products, but from a South Bend native, do you have to go back to 78? David
Charles Macon was Michigan City.
A Kansas
Dan
product.
Palambizio was Michigan City.
David Magley, am I saying that correct?
That long ago?
Unless I'm missing somebody. Michigan City, Warsaw, Gary Roosevelt. Obviously,
Warsaw, you got Jeff Gross and Kevin Alt, right?
Plenty of Fort Wayne products. Luke Recker, if you want to go up to that corner of the state as well. But yeah, it's been a while. So we'll see that tonight. Zane Doty, probably the underdog in that sense.
One other note, did you see yesterday, DeMar Hamlin cleared to be able to return to full football activities. I'll be curious to see, Kevin, I don't know how to say this without it sounding uncomfortable. DeMar Hamlin was a good player for Buffalo, right? But that's a position that, like, you've got to be – it's tough from one year to the next to not have any drop-off whatsoever. I'm not saying that he's going to have drop-off at all, but, like, let's just say hypothetically that DeMar Hamlin, just being away from the game, lost a half a step. Is Buffalo in a position, though, where it's almost impossible this year to release him?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what. I want to say he started like 13 games for them in 2022. So I don't know if he's viewed as like a locked-in 100% player for them.
Exactly.
If he's more of a special
That's probably a
teamer.
better way of saying it. Yeah, I don't know. I've always viewed him as kind of a fringe star. Like a Isaiah Rodgers type player. You know what I mean?
Obviously from a PR standpoint, you would love to see him on the team. He did confirm yesterday, right, that it was, and I can't even pronounce it, Commotion cordis or whatever it's called. That was the
of course, those that feel that it was otherwise probably are not necessarily going to take to heart, pardon the pun, what he says, right?
Yeah.
Let's be real
on that. All right, Alan Karpick going to join us next. We'll talk a little Zach Edey and Stephen Holder coming up 8 o'clock hour. We'll get his thoughts 8 days away from the NFL draft.
Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
A couple of house cleaning notes, by the way. Alan Karpick going to join us in just a couple of minutes. But number one, I wanted to say good morning to a couple of folks. Alex Armbruster and Jeremy Ballard, who are very active on social media and about this program and appear to listen every single morning, and it's very much appreciated. So good morning to them. And to all of you who are listening, we very much appreciate it. Also, wanted to point out Penn Station sent out the tweet yesterday, and thank you to John Griffin here at our station for putting it together. We are once again, Kevin, going to be part of the Elio Drive for 5 with Penn Station East Coast subs. Nice. I think that will include probably having Elio on this program a few times. And if you go to Penn Station to get, who doesn't love going there and getting the chicken teriyaki in particular, I suggest. But you can register to not only win a free sub, but also with Meyershank Racing and Elio, a Carb Day experience, which will include, I'm going to be showing people around the garage area and talking with them for an hour or so and giving them kind of a behind-the-scenes glimpse of what takes place at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on Carb Day.
I'll probably just be drinking beer.
You'll be drinking carbs, right?
Yes,
Also, NHL playoffs, who you rooting for? I'm kind of torn because the Flames are my team, right? I've always kind of liked both the Rangers and the Islanders, and that seems ridiculous, right? Isn't that like saying you're a Cubs and a White Sox fan?
Yeah, and I'm like, do I just jump on the Bruins wagon after what they just had during this regular season?
I'd like to experience some winning for your teams this year.
I feel like with the A's, I should go the other end of the spectrum.
That's fine.
And after the Notre Dame basketball season.
You realize that the winner of the President's Cup very rarely wins the Stanley Cup. But you want to take them? You got Bruins? I'm going Islanders.
Let me take a closer look at it.
Give me the Lightning.
I mean, you talk about a wagon, Mark.
Well, okay.
Come on.
Jeez. Mark's going to cheer for Alabama.
How about the Winnipeg Jets?
Mark's the Jimmy Cook of the show.
Give me the. Oh, please. Give me the Kraken. Then there you go.
It's Kraken, right?
No, it's not. You are incorrect, sir.
I know it's Kraken. It's like a creature of the sea, right?
And it's Alan Karpick.
Correct.
Joining us right now on 3.com, the president and publisher there. Talk a little Zach Edey declaring for the NBA draft, but maintaining, of course, the possibility to return to West Lafayette. Alan, the level of surprise from this move by Zach Edey?
Virtually none, to be honest, guys. I mean, this was not the least bit of a surprise. It's happened to many Purdue guys over the years, a lot of players that they go in and test the waters in the NBA. And I think with Zach Edey, if you're him, you see what the heck's out there. This is a great evaluation time, and if things come in better than maybe expected, then you make the leap. But I just think it was not a surprise at all, and Purdue fans will have to be patient over the next few weeks to see how it all shakes out.
Alan, in your gut here with Zach Edey, and I don't know that any of us know that. I don't know that Zach Edey knows this answer, but I think it's safe to say right now, and you and I have talked about this on the air, I think, in previous conversations, Edey probably slots as a pretty sure second-round pick. I don't know that he can play his way into the first round at no fault of his, just because of the deteriorated value of the position that he plays at the NBA level. But if you had to guess, Alan, he needs to be assured of what area in order to stay in the draft?
Well, I would think it's a guaranteed contract of some sort. I mean, it does come down to, but in today's NIL world, it does come down to what opportunities you'll have. Purdue's worked through some of the, as I understand it, some of the challenges that it has to deal with respect to him being a Canadian citizen. That he'll have opportunities at Purdue as well. That's what gives Purdue, I think, a reasonable chance in this whole situation for him to return. There's no doubt he's been very open about the fact that he likes Purdue, loves Purdue. His mom loves Purdue. It certainly didn't finish on the level the way the season ended last year. That he's not all his business isn't finished as a college player, but. It's really hard to predict exactly what he's going to do until he gets in and sees how he stacks up. But you're right. That's the general consensus, is he's not a guy that is going to jump into the first round. And does he want to stay in college, a place that he's come to like very much, and finish up his business here in West Lafayette as opposed to maybe playing in the G League somewhere? the bus rides aren't as glamorous as what you might get in college basketball, as we always say.
Alan, could you explain the whole international visa, NIL ramifications maybe a little bit more? It's pretty confusing to me, but it seems like the fact that Zach Edey was just National Player of the Year, all of a sudden his status as international student athlete has risen to the point where he would be rewarded for that. Maybe if, in, I don't know, William Berg's case, as I think he's from Sweden or something, a player that maybe is not at Zach Edey's status wouldn't necessarily be allowed to benefit as much. Do I have that right, or am I totally off base?
Well, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert on it, but it has something to do, I believe, with his visa or his ability to stay in the United States and what he can do and what he can earn here, and based on his scholarship and all of those kinds of issues. And as I understand it, Purdue has worked through a lot of those issues. I don't know, Tom Mitchell from the compliance staff on campus I know it's kind of been a full-time job to get that figured out. And from what we understand, they've made progress. But that's what I believe it has some things to do with respect to his ability to be in the United States and what limitations there are on that.
Do we get Alan Karpick with us, by the way, from on3.com, Gold and Black here, covering Purdue. Do we get any sort of vibe that the Zach Edey decision here could impact a transfer portal decision on Trey Kaufman-Renn, Caleb Furst, anyone else on Purdue's roster?
I don't think so. I mean, there's no, those guys are both pretty committed to what's going on. The second you say that, somebody will be in the transfer portal by sundown. So, but it does seem like that's where it stands at this point. Yes, those guys will be impacted from a playing time standpoint, certainly, but I also think Purdue may play a little bit differently next year, have some ability to bring those guys out a little bit more with another year of experience on the court. Who knows whether Zach Edey I wouldn't be shocked if he becomes a little bit more of a spot-up shooter if he stays in West Lafayette, because that's kind of what Purdue did with Caleb Swanigan back in the day. Different type of player, I understand, but guys that they want to put them in the best position to show what they can do in professional basketball. But no, I don't think there's anything imminent there at all. But again, anything is possible in the NIL, in the NIL world, but also in the transfer portal world. But there's no indication that anything's changing there.
Alan Karpick is our guest. He's on the Payless Liquors hotline. You can read his work, of course, at on3.com. And Alan, I very much appreciate it. You guys did us a solid by kind of running over and letting people know about our interview with Ryan Walters from earlier this week. So I'm curious, just your overall impressions of, as he gets familiar with the Purdue football roster. Maybe it's too early to know this, but what have been your initial impressions in terms of Ryan Walters and how things might look different for Purdue football?
Well, I think it's youth, or relative to being 37 years old and full of energy. Not that us older folks aren't full of energy, but he certainly has brought that to the table. He's very strategic in what he's about. Even the fact that he's not about wasted motion. That's clear when his choice is to not have a spring game, partly due to the number of not injuries of players that are going to be able to play, but also the fact that he's trying to keep his eye on the prize, that have his team in the best position possible for that opener against Fresno State in a very difficult schedule this year with Ohio State and Michigan coming back on it. But I've been impressed with him. I think all the signs, especially in recruiting, are positive. He's getting high level of talent in at least to visit in West Lafayette. He's had some commitments. I think that's what they want. They wanted a guy that, yes, he's a defensive guy, but he's a young mind. When you're 37 years old, I guess you're hip by definition, and he seems to be that way. The players seem to really responded well to him. But the proof's going to be in what happens, obviously, when the season starts, and he fully admits too. I think he's self-aware. That's another thing that impresses me a little bit. He's aware that this is his first rodeo as a head coach, and he's learning things on a daily basis. He admits that all the time. I think that's a good thing. But energy, youthfulness, and the ability to connect to players are probably the three biggest positives from Ryan Walters to date.
Alan, I do want to go back to Zach Edey for a second here. Do you get the vibe like he's leaning one way or the other on this?
I don't, and he certainly has said that even after Purdue's meltdown in the NCAA tournament. That he's just talked about he's got options in front of him. He's a very stoic guy, at least outwardly, and he is a guy that thinks about things a great deal. He's also a guy that just doesn't like to pull a lot of attention his way. I just don't have a real feel for it. I just think if there's an opportunity there and it's better, he and his family think it's better than what he has in West Lafayette, he'll probably take it. But I do think he if any guy is a National Player of the Year, I know Oscar Tshiebwe came back last year as well, comes back, though, it's Zach Edey, just because of his affinity for his teammates. And that's real. He's talked about that all year. There aren't many guys that are 7'4", it seems, that are kind of vocal leaders or at least quiet leaders of the basketball team. He was very much that way, and I think he'd like to finish his career up on a heck of a lot better note than he did in Columbus back in March.
Alan, I know obviously you guys will be keeping track of that storyline and then obviously the football one as well. What else you got cooking at on3.com?
Well, with the transfer portal being open now, up to the end of April 30th, it's head on a swivel time. I mean, everything. There will be some Purdue players that will certainly at the end of spring practice this week, no doubt will enter the portal, and Purdue will certainly be trying to make some roster moves. So that's probably about as much of anything. And obviously, too, basketball recruiting and basketball camps. Those types of things will certainly dot the landscape of our site over the next few weeks.
Again, Alan Karpick, president and publisher over at On3, Gold and Black coverage of Purdue. Alan, as always, the 7 o'clock hour, you are consistent with your time slot. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to the offseason coverage here.
All right, sounds great. Thanks so much, guys.
Alan Karpick. Jake, we talked about it probably this time last year with Trayce Jackson-Davis. The trend here in the past couple of years with big guys in college basketball, they return. Armando Bacot, he returned. He's returning again. Oscar Tshiebwe, who was brought up from Kentucky, he returns. Drew Timme at Gonzaga. Obviously, Trayce. Probably for two reasons. One, NIL. The other, we see how the big man is being devalued a little bit more in the NBA. So for those reasons, I think that would give Purdue fans some optimism. And Zach Edey strikes me as a guy, Jake, that'd be pretty self-motivated to get that sour taste out of his mouth and return.
Yeah, I would agree with that latter part in particular, right? I mean, that is just such a thing to have hang over you. Back-to-back years of losing to just a smaller school that,
quite the
that were
embarrassment.
Kind of the laughing stock, right? I mean, St. Peter's, at least there was, they
made the Sweet 16.
Yeah, and they beat some pretty darn good teams. Well, they made the Elite Eight, right? I mean,
I meant Purdue had gotten to the Sweet 16.
Exactly that. But, so I would think that has to fuel you a little bit, but at the same time also feel like such a faraway mountain. You know what I mean? And does that pressure then every single time that there's a close game next year, is it, oh gosh, it's going to collapse on us again. Here we go again. Because the narrative's now out there, right? The narrative's out there that, like, Purdue, it doesn't matter what they do, they can't win the big one, etc. Does that weigh on them? I think all that factors in.
And do you worry at all about injury if you're Edey, with big guys and going back to school? That Purdue football schedule, I know we brought this up with Ryan Walters earlier, and, Purdue certainly benefits from being in the Big Ten West. Their schedule this year, Fresno State, at Virginia Tech, Syracuse. There's the non-conference. And then the start to Big Ten play. Wisconsin, Illinois, at Iowa, Ohio State, at Nebraska, at Michigan. So you look at the non-conference, no just like guaranteed victory. You would hope Fresno State at home would certainly be that. But the crossover at Michigan and Ohio State. Last year you benefited. Yes, you had Penn State, but that was in your own place to open up the season. You're not getting that in Ryan Walters' first season.
Speaking of injuries, you ever had tennis elbow?
No, but I've got a buddy that has had that and complains really hard. I do have to admit this. Yesterday I was walking back to my car.
Do I need to call QC Kinetics?
Well, I can 317-559-PAIN, by the way.
Okay.
8 o'clock hour, I'll shed a little bit more light on that front. I was walking back to my car in Bloomington yesterday. I mean, picture yesterday on a college campus.
Yeah.
I mean, heavenly.
Yeah.
Just incredible. So I stayed after class for about 30 minutes. One of my students is walking towards me. He has totally changed his outfit from what he wore to class. I mean, he's got backwards hat, sunglasses, jersey, shorts. I mean, he's going to upstairs. Are you joining? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I won't be joining. I give him a little fist pound. What do? Just trip on the curb in front of me.
That's good, yeah.
Just smoke the curb. I mean, just right foot right into the curb.
Now,
These
Kev.
girls behind Connor's my student. They start giggling at me. I'm like, could I look more old in a 5-second period than that right now?
Well, wait another 5 years when that trip sidelines you for 3 days.
Jake, I iced the foot last night. I might have done it this morning before coming in for work. Maddie just started laughing at me.
So you get me hooked up at QC Kinetics, and I'll get you hooked up with the Good Feet store.
We have a handshake agreement here.
That's right.
Kevin,
That's right.
questionable for the 9 o'clock
Of course,
hour.
we're both going to hurt each other by the handshake, but that's okay.
Just put me on the same list with Giannis right now and John Morant, maybe Sabonis with the sternum, but certainly not one of my finer moments, to say the least. 8 o'clock hour coming up. Stephen Holder, talk a little Colts draft.
on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Our next guest added something that now we both have in common. I believe it was over the weekend, potentially, maybe earlier this week. Stephen Holder from ESPN.com is with us. Stephen, I'll never forget the day when Kelly Tilley, the head of the Colts cheerleading program, asked me to be a judge for the Colts cheerleading squad, and I looked at her like, do you have the wrong person? I was dumbfounded by that move by her, and I'll never forget also like when we'd gather in the room to discuss the potential candidates and thinking, when do I interject and what the hell should I say? Was it equally as awkward for you as it was for me?
Yeah, because at first I was like, wait a minute, I don't know what I'm doing, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
And they were like, yeah, we're fine with that. Oh, so basically you're saying I'm a complete idiot, but you're good with that. All right, well, thanks. No, but it was definitely surprising for sure, and it was actually kind of stressful because it was hard. I was like, I like them all. They're all good.
There's not a lot. I don't know if you can compare it to the Colts quarterback process because I don't know if there's a lot of separation.
I'd be Simon Cowell. I'd be up there like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? You sidestep too much to the left there. What's going on?
I mean, there were really, I think out of 46 candidates, there were only like 2 or 3 where I was like, nah, that's not the one. And the rest, I was kind of like, yeah, I could see it. Totally. And then there were a handful where I was like, oh, yeah, she's off the charts. She's good.
And,
so that's basically what I ended up with, which was, all right, 90% of you are good in my book, but they can't all make it, so it's tough.
And it's also like a huge deal. I mean, maybe I'm stating the obvious there, but like obviously, you imagine, your whole life is spent doing some sort of whatever cheerleading, dance, however you want to call it, and you're trying to make an NFL team. Boy, the emotions. I was like, gosh, this is way too much responsibility for me. I need to go home and think about myself after this.
No, I think that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily appreciate is the fact that it is a big deal for these young women. And, I think not just that it's a big deal, but also the fact that, some of them, the sacrifices they are making or willing to make, if they make the team. So there was one young woman who was going to drive in from Chicago to perform. And I'm like, you're going to do this every week? Like, yeah, she was.
And these are on top of normal jobs that they all have, some of them are still in school, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Some are pretty accomplished. We had a couple physicians, a couple who were in dental school, and I was like, all right, I could barely make it through, anatomy class in college, It's like, so anyway, yeah, it was pretty impressive. And again, no idea why they called me, but yeah, I was more than happy, especially because some of the people on the panel, they're either, a lot of them are either former Colts cheerleaders or have some expertise in dance, whether it's ballet or modern dance or something. And I was just sitting there like, I write about football.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
I struggled to do the butterfly stretch.
Yeah, I definitely did not feel like I was in the right room.
Stephen, yesterday I was shopping, and I'm in the store where I'm shopping, and all of a sudden the manager starts running around frantically. And I'm like, what's going on? And she said, well, we can't figure it out, but the fire department's on the way because the alarms detect smoke, and we don't know where it's coming from. And the fire trucks rolled up. It was very exciting, and in fact, it was like some sort of a faulty thing. But I thought, is this symbolic of the NFL draft and the fact that this is the time now where there's smoke all over the place that's being detected, but there's no actual fire? And that includes this latest narrative that perhaps picks 2 and 3 aren't even going to be a quarterback, and that the Colts are going to get their choice of the second quarterback in the draft. Your thoughts on that smoke?
Okay, so I'm glad you asked. I do think there is smoke here. I think it's a lot of. I think some of it is along the lines of what you are describing. However, I heard something yesterday afternoon that kind of changed my opinion on Houston in particular and whether they might do what is being speculated, which is not pick CJ Stroud or pick another position even outside of quarterback. I heard some evidence, or I heard a supporting argument for that actually made some sense, and I think there's some possible truth to it. Let's put it that way. I don't even want to say the argument makes sense because I disagree. I think they should take a quarterback because I think their franchise doesn't really have any direction right now. But be that as it may, that's not the point. The point is, would they possibly do what is being speculated? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, look, I get that there is a lot of smoke right now, but there are the people who are saying this is the other thing that's important here. The people who are saying this are reputable. And look, we all, Adam Schefter is not infallible, but when I hear Adam, and he's not the only one, but I hear Adam go on TV and go to the mat on this and say, listen, I'm telling you, do not rule this out. It's because someone with some validity, and probably multiple people, are telling him that. So as much as I can't believe it, and as much as I think it's absolutely ridiculous that Houston would do that, it doesn't matter. I think there's some chance that it's true. And again, he's not the only one. And I heard from someone yesterday who also reflected that information. And I was flabbergasted. But again, I think there's some truth to it. Don't ask me why. I can't help you with that. But that's what I can tell you.
Okay, let's play out this sort of scenario then, Steven. Will Anderson goes to Houston. I mean, by all accounts, this is a guy that could be a double-digit sack guy for a decade. I mean, I right. Can understand some of that thinking for DeMeco Ryans. What I can't really
coach.
Yeah, what I can't really understand is in Arizona at 3 sitting there and making a selection with a player that I don't think we've talked about any player in this draft process, non-quarterback wise, that necessarily is a slam dunk to go in the top 5 outside of Anderson. Tyree
right.
Wilson from Texas Tech is, potentially there's some corners that might be in that range, but there's not a left tackle. There's not a wideout. There's not this obvious name that we've talked about through this process. So my question then becomes, isn't someone going to trade up to get CJ Stroud? Like, what am I missing on CJ Stroud right now that all of a sudden could take him all the way down to number 4, and the Colts could have Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis all to pick from?
Well, now that's where I actually do agree that it's nonsense. Okay, because if you're Arizona, at that point, I'm just taking whatever I can get in a trade because they have no incentive to make that pick. Because who would it be, as you said, right? I mean, it's not as if they don't need the talent, right? They definitely have a deficiency of talent, but they're not winning anything this year. They need multiple players, and for them, the move is trade down, get multiple picks, and go restock your roster and replace the players who all apparently want out of Arizona because apparently everyone wants out of Arizona, right? So they're going to have some key players to replace here the way they're going. So I agree with that. I don't understand what motivation Arizona would have under that scenario to make the pick because Will Anderson, I get it. They're going to run and turn the card in. If they don't have any takers, I'm running to the podium to turn the card in for Will Anderson if you're Arizona, right? You're going to be fine with that. You'll sleep fine on next Thursday night. But if it's not him, I don't know where they go. Then it does feel like you're kind of settling because I think the drop-off does seem somewhat significant after that in terms of the non-quarterbacks, right? Unless you're just okay with Jalen Carter, and I can't say where things stand with him. There's just so much to that situation. So it's interesting. I do think the Arizona scenario gets really interesting there if CJ Stroud does not go to Houston.
Again, Stephen Holder, ESPN.com with us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Let's focus on Stroud here. By all accounts, the most accurate quarterback in this draft. We saw what he did against Georgia in the national semifinal. Where is the nitpicking that's starting to build here? Is it that it was too easy for him at Ohio State, too much of a talent advantage he had on a routine basis? Are there questions about his coachability? Have you heard anything on the Stroud front that could all of a sudden kind of remove him from the 1A, 1B sort of thought process we've had all along with Bryce Young?
The only thing that's been kind of speculated that maybe there's some validity to that I know is I think people are asking maybe about coachability. Now, I don't know anything about it personally, right? So I'm not going to speculate. I do not know that. But if that is a question, okay, if that is a question, then that is a question you really have to vet when it comes to your quarterback for obvious reasons, right? So I just can't speak to it personally because I don't have that information and I don't have that intel. But if that's an issue, then I somewhat get it. But I would say this, when it comes to the fit from a football perspective, now let's just play this out, as you said. If he were to get to number 4, right, and I have no idea whether that's going to happen, I think it's a little bit far-fetched, but not out of the question. If he gets to number 4, I love the fit for the Colts. And I know that's kind of obvious. People know that he's really talented. But, I mean, specifically for the Colts, he gives you, we talk about Anthony Richardson's downfield ability, but you get that to some degree with CJ Stroud, and you also get the intermediate and short-range accuracy as well. I think his pocket presence, I guess, at times could be better. And he certainly isn't the athlete that some of these other guys are. He's probably, of the 4, probably the least impressive athlete. And so that's something you'd have to get your head around that if you're the Colts, and you'd have to determine how important that is to you. But in terms of being the kind of quarterback that Shane Steichen wants, he wants to have an aggressive downfield up-tempo attack. I mean, you can get that with CJ Stroud.
I was thinking about this, Stephen. Stephen Holder's our guest. He's on the Payless Liquors hotline. You can read his work, of course, at ESPN.com, covering the Colts in the NFL. I've also heard, Stephen, we played some audio yesterday, I believe, from Michael Lombardi talking about question marks of CJ Stroud's coachability. I know nothing of that. I'm not at practices at Ohio State or wherever it may be.
Right.
But I got to thinking about this, Stephen. If there are league-wide question marks about the coachability of CJ Stroud, then theoretically that means that critique would be coming from inquiry from his coaches. The only person that would be able to speak to the coachability of CJ Stroud would be people who have been assigned the responsibility of coaching him, right?
That's a fair assessment. Yeah.
So if I am, and I'm not saying this to pick on Ohio State, but how uncoachable must a guy be to have that narrative floating about him, because it's in the best interest of Ohio State to speak him up? Because if I'm a kid that's coming out right now that's a big-time recruit and I'm looking at where to go and I'm going, wait a minute, here's a guy that's leaving Ohio State and his coaches are actually hurting his NFL value by speaking about him, I don't want to go play for that group. So where would it be coming from?
I think your guess is pretty reasonable. Let's put it that way, right? I mean, neither of us have had that conversation, so I can't speak to it personally, and I know that you are not speaking to it personally. But it has to emanate from somewhere, okay?
Because wouldn't it be in Ohio State's best interest to have him go as high as possible?
Yes, I agree with that, yes. There also, and this is getting into real speculative territory, right? But there also is the idea that these coaches also want to have credibility with NFL teams. They have lots of other prospects, and they will have prospects every year. They also have relationships. Some of these coaches want to work in the NFL at some point, right? So there's all little tentacles to this idea and some of these notions that we can at least consider. But I agree on the whole, right? It doesn't make sense necessarily, at a glance. I get it, but if you drill down a little bit, you could see some ways where there might be some methods of or not motivations, put it that way. There might be some motivations where people might be more honest. So, we'll see.
Stephen, last one from me. How much do you think this draft should be about you support the quarterback at all costs, like second, third round, fourth round? I mean, if you look at Andrew Luck after that draft, it's well documented, all the offensive picks they made. I mean, hell, even if you go back to the Peyton Manning draft, there were a lot of offensive picks made right after the selection of Manning. If you look purely at the Colts roster, corner is a massive need. But how much do you juggle? Yes, you really need a cornerback, and a cornerback is a premium position, but you also need to go all in on fully supporting your young QB.
No, I actually like that idea of really doubling down on this QB. I think you can get that corner next year if you end up having to do that, right? I mean, are the Colts winning the Super Bowl this year? Hell no, right? So this should be about the quarterback, because you want to know in a couple of years, you want to know what you have. And the only way you're truly going to know that is if you do right by this quarterback. That is what I believe. And it's interesting. You mentioned the 2012 draft. It's something that we don't give enough credit to Ryan Grigson. He figured that out. And to his credit, he actually went all in on Andrew Luck. He bet on Andrew Luck in that draft. Now, Andrew Luck versus RG3, I will always say, was a Jim Irsay decision, ultimately, right? It doesn't mean everybody else wasn't on board. But even if you take that decision out of Ryan Grigson's hands, they still went and got T.Y. Hilton and the tight ends, and they did a great job of betting on the quarterback and going all in and doubling down on his talents. Maybe they're not getting Andrew Luck in this particular draft. I don't know. But whoever they get, they need to maximize the opportunity and potential for that player to succeed. And that is how you do it. And frankly, this team under Chris Ballard has not done right by the quarterback in many instances, I feel. Last year being the latest example.
I would agree.
So, yeah, it's time for that to change. That is, I think, that has been Chris Ballard's, I think, biggest blind spot is thinking that the quarterback, or almost operating like the quarterback functions in a vacuum, and that it's not all interwoven, right? It is. It's completely interwoven, and they're dependent on one another. You can't skate by at right guard and think there's no impact on the quarterback, just for an example.
Stephen, this draft, the Colts have how many picks?
I believe it's 7. Is it 7, Kevin? I can't remember.
3 in round 5, none in 6, 2 in 7, so maybe 9, 8.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yes,
okay.
You're right.
So the question that I have for you, Stephen Holder, would be this. We know theoretically, and unless something seismic happens, that with their first pick, they're going to go quarterback. How deep into the draft, then, do you believe you get to where they shift from, like, need and strictly into the best player available at that spot? Or do they have critical needs that are going to run for them all the way through the draft?
Yeah, well, I think we can go back to their history. I think Chris Ballard's history in this area, it's a good question. And I think if you look at how he has operated, I think the answer is relatively clear. They definitely target needs, I think, through round 4, generally. And sometimes it may be 3, sometimes it might be 5, but roughly round 4. I mean, look at last year. Let's see, what was they went with? They had a tight end and the tackle in the 3rd round. So I mean, those were needs, right? So I think well into the 3rd round, they were still picking needs. They've done it into the 4th as well. I think the 4th round is roughly where you're talking about, and it's worked for them, I will say, because on the back half of the draft, what they do is they just pick, their type of athlete, the type of athletes that they prefer, that the Colts tend to lean toward. They pick them in the back half of those rounds. at positions where they could use some depth. And sometimes it's not a position where they need depth. It's just a really good player they like. And that has worked out. And I think if you're targeting needs in the back half in those later rounds, it gets problematic because those are imperfect players, which tells me they are probably unlikely to contribute right away. Sometimes they do. Rodney Thomas did that last year as a 7th-round pick. But that typically doesn't happen unless you get lucky. So you're looking there for players you can develop. And if you're doing a good job of developing them, they will play, within a few years. But in terms of day one impact, that's going to have to come from those first 3 rounds, maybe 4th round. Anything beyond that, you got a little bit lucky.
And Stephen Holder casting for Bring It On 7, I believe is what he was doing over the weekend in cheerleader auditions for the Colts. Yeah, beating me out for that role there. No ill will against him. Stephen, we'll see you later today up at the complex.
All right, guys. It's a tough job, but
That's right.
Right, exactly. Stephen Holder right there, ESPN.com. Colts in week 2 of their offseason program. Media availabilities every Wednesday. Next week, they'll actually hold a mini camp. Before the draft. They're allowed to do that with a first-year head coach. Something, I brought up, Jake, about supporting that quarterback. Steven mentioned it right there. I mean, after Andrew Luck, you went tight end Fleener, tight end Dwayne Allen, traded back into the 3rd round for T.Y. Hilton. Then on day 3, you went Vic Ballard and LaVon Brazil. You continue to go running back.
Forgot about LaVon Brazil.
And receiver. Remember that Detroit comeback? That wild game where... Actually, Kevin Lee was on the call.
Yeah, that's right. Bob Lamey was out, yep.
LaVon Brazil had the touchdown that kind of spearheaded that. But you know this full well. Look at the Peyton draft. Jerome Pathon, E.G. Green, and Steve McKinney.
Yep.
First 3 picks right after Peyton. So think about that. When you drafted generational QB in 98, generational QB in 2012, you then didn't mess around with the next handful of picks with Grigson, trio of picks with Polian, and making sure that you tried to support that quarterback as best you could. Again, right now, if you look at the Colts roster, corner. I mean, jumps off the page at you in terms of biggest need, but the philosophy of you do everything you can to support the QB, that probably is the one that carries the most weight here.
Bigger Colt draft disappointment, E.J. Green or T.J. Green? Or no, E.G. Green or T.J. Green?
Boy, you can probably speak to this better. I would say TJ just because he was the earlier pick, right? EG was a 3rd rounder?
I think that's right. But it was the fact that E.G. Green was out of Florida State. He was a receiver, and it was like, man, he got Peyton Manning. Peyton was a pretty good player, to be honest with you. I mean, he was a nice...
Peyton had a nice stint.
E.G. Green just couldn't stay... No fault of his, he just couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah, TJ Green just would get personal foul penalties after personal foul penalties. He looked good.
He did.
You talk about, eye black and batting gloves and maybe, a couple of necklaces. That's a Clemson product, Jake, TJ Green.
Yeah, and I can't recall, so correct me here, Kevin, was it that he was primarily safety at Clemson and they put him at corner, or he was primarily corner at Clemson and they tried him at safety?
Yeah, I think the latter. There were several NFL teams that thought he was better suited as a corner, so I think Seattle maybe gave him a crack there. At one point, very fitting with your Seahawks gear right now. That's a Sean Alexander Seahawks-looking shirt right there.
This is, this is like the old school Seahawks. I just like I'm not a fan of the Seahawks per se, but I just love their old logo. I just think it's such a cool logo, man.
Jed says if quarterback is this important, take a quarterback at 4 and then take Hendon Hooker later too.
Call me crazy. I've actually thought about that.
How do you evaluate them?
I've actually thought about, is it worth taking 2 quarterbacks and just seeing which one's better?
Going the RG3 Kirk Cousins route?
I just think there's no way to, properly evaluate them. Isn't it always awkward?
I mean, practice time, right? And then quarterback by committee never works, but...
Krysten Peek talk a little NBA draft coming up around...
I want to know about Gary.
9:40. Gary the dog. Are we sure it's Gary?
Pretty sure it's Gary.
I did think it was kind of an older human name.
Just ask her, how's Gary doing, and see what she says. She was like, huh?
What if
we broke up back in March.
What if she was dating a guy named Gary? Mm-hmm. Speaking of Gary, I watched A Million Little Things last night, got caught up on it. I'm convinced that we are the last two people on earth still watching that show.
I've never seen
Is there
that.
anybody, I would like to know, it's time to shout out my cell phone. I haven't done that in a while. I cleaned out my cell phone messages last night, so I've got open real estate here. 317-523-9288 is my cell number.
For a second there, I thought you only get like 200 a month, and you were just clearing them out for the rest of April.
I'm on the 1998 plan. 317-523-9288 is my cell. I like when people text me, but I'm curious if anybody besides the two of us are watching the TV show A Million Little Things. I think we're the last two. But you can just send me a text to say hello. I'd like to know that you're listening.
Shout out to the YouTube chat, too. They're
always
dedicated.
Energy
Dedicated folks in there.
Through the roof in the YouTube chat. And I do have feeling back in my toes.
Well, that's
Excuse me?
I have feeling back in my toes.
Was it cold in here?
His trip over the curb.
For those that have been
He's
curious
trying to
about that.
toes, God what?
Just wait. What are you, 35?
33.
You always make his age more than he is.
I always think I thought you were born in, what year were you born?
How many times have we had this discussion, you think, Mark?
Many.
Born in 89.
Kevin gives
What
off
year are
old
we?
man
We're in-
vibes, that's why.
Okay, so you'll be 34 this year.
Correct, yeah. 34 in September.
I'll get it figured out eventually.
You would think
Happy 40th, Kev!
after what we did for Jake's 50th, he would maybe remember when the other birthdays are.
When you
in
turn
the studio.
50, then everything's clouded. You guys are all young bucks. I'm like, okay, 30, 35, it's all the same. Interchangeable.
Morning checkdown.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
I'm going to go with a total curveball here to start out, which means not baseball, but rather we'll go with hockey again because we talked about it earlier. How about the Indy Fuel, by the way, getting set? You said Friday. Their playoffs are underway,
On the
right?
road Friday. Home next Tuesday and Thursday there. And by the way, I have picked my team.
Okay.
My NHL team. I've gone to two NHL games in my life. One, the Coyotes, I don't even know if they're in existence anymore. The other team was the Avalanche, so I will go with the Avs.
That's cool. Avalanche is cool. That means that you are head-to-head now because you have adopted Seattle, correct?
Well, I said the Lightning, who are a 6th seed, and you guys are like, oh, what a front runner.
Well,
they're the 6th seed.
I think the history of the Lightning indicates
and this
that
is
they
the
are
time
a
of the
little
year
bit
where
more.
the lightning strikes, right? Lightning last night 7-3 over the Toronto Maple Leafs. As a matter of fact, road teams winning every game last night in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. This is the opening round. All teams going up 1-0. New York Rangers 5-1 over the Devils. Putty very upset, but did paint his face. Jets over the Golden Knights 5-1, and the Seattle, again, Kraken. Seattle
Sure,
Kraken.
they pronounce it Kraken, not just like us in Indiana.
No, I know a Kraken's a mythical figure of the sea. I know what it all is. 3-1 over the Kevin's Colorado Avalanche.
So who was your team?
Well, here's the thing. I've always kind of liked the Islanders just because it's like the lesser team in New York, and they were really good when I was really, really, really little. But in 94, when I was an intern in New York, I got to go to one hockey game. I went to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals in 94 between the Rangers and the Vancouver Canucks. And the Rangers won the Stanley Cup. You would think that would have made me like a diehard. I was just there kind of for the experience. But nostalgically speaking, I kind of like the Rangers. But how can I say Rangers and Islanders both?
Yeah, it's like
You know what I mean?
Yankees a bit.
But I have an Islanders hat, so I guess I'll go Islanders.
I'm staying with the Lightning. Forget you guys.
Shout out
They're
to
6th seed.
the pride of Elwood, Blake Courtney, who I lived next to freshman year. He reminded me that Jack Johnson for the Avs, born in Indiana, born in Indianapolis.
Really? Is he a Pork Tutor kid? Is that right?
No, he moved very shortly.
Okay, or I'm thinking, I know Jaron Jackson was, but I was thinking there was somebody.
Michigan.
Bubble Toes Jack Johnson.
What's that?
The singer.
I was going to say, when you Google Jack Johnson, you don't get the Avalanche.
I thought
player
Bubble Toes
necessarily.
was what Kevin had yesterday after tripping over the
First.
curb.
I missed a curb.
The NBA last night, all the home teams got it done. Celtics, Cavs, and Suns. For the Cavs and Suns, very important to even those series up at 1. Tonight, Lakers, Grizz. Lakers looking to go up 2-0 on the road. We'll see about Ja Morant's status. Things sound very iffy for Giannis Antetokounmpo playing Game 2 against the Heat. Of course, Milwaukee already down 1-0 at home. When's the last time a 1 seed's been down 2-0 in the playoffs?
Was Denver, or was Denver up 2-0 when they knocked out
Seattle?
Seattle? Yeah.
Speaking of Denver, Dikembe Mutombo back then. Nikola Jokic tonight looking to go up 2-0 on the T-Wolves. And again, Draymond Green, with the NBA mentioning that his past history contributing to it, suspended for tomorrow night's Game 3. So for those in the NBA does everything to cater to the big market, dream teams, et cetera, this doesn't fit that narrative.
By the way, good morning, Eli. Jake, my 9-year-old, wanted me to let you know that we're listening in line to the drop-off at school. His name is Eli, if you can give him a shout-out. Eli, good morning to you, man.
What a great day to be outside, Eli.
Listen,
recess is going to be awesome.
Listen to your teachers, pay attention in class, and thank you for listening on your way into school. Cardinals yesterday losing to the Arizona Diamondbacks 8-7 in Major League Baseball. Guardians and Tigers splitting. Oh, no, I take that back. Tigers sweeping a doubleheader over the Guardians.
Wins, right?
What's that?
A couple one-run wins for the Tigers,
That's
right?
right, 4-3 and 1-0 over the Cleveland Guardians. Reds blanked by the Rays 10-0.
Well, where are you going to go?
Phillies and White Sox splitting a doubleheader. Cubs over the Athletics 4-0. Cute fella 1-0 over the Washington Nationals. And the Indianapolis Indians on the short end against Memphis 5-4. The Redbirds
I think Kevin meant when we pick teams, he was trying to think who was going to finish worse. So that's why I picked the Athletics, because they're on the way to, they're going to get to 20 losses before anybody.
But remember last
it.
year we thought the Reds were going to go like 26 and 160 or something. And
I just want to be charitable, a little bit philanthropic, help you guys out with.
yeah, you've won all of these
wins.
challenges we've done, so it's nice of you to spread it around a little bit.
Give the 6-packs to some other people there on that front. Jake, tomorrow the weather does look really good for the oval test over there at IMS.
Yeah, testing on Thursday and Friday. Friday looks like it's going to be a little
ugly.
more dicey, but good chance to go out. I think you can go on the viewing mounds. We will also carry all of it live at IndyCar.com.
Saw Scott McLaughlin tweeted 30-mile-per-hour winds tomorrow on the oval. That could be a little interesting for the first time in 2023 for the cars to get out there on the oval. The decal going up on the JW Marriott yesterday. It was a cool sight to see there. So the month of May inching closer. It is a beautiful start to this Wednesday. Going to feel like summer, I think, today and tomorrow. Kevin and Corey on the other side, 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
5, The Fan.
By the way, I wanted to read this text, and thank you for everybody that's been texting me this morning, which I always enjoy. Somebody did write, and they said, Jake, I've been a big fan. I enjoy listening to you, but I have no idea what you look like. So I said, naturally, I'm kind of a cross between Clooney and Brad Pitt. Is that a fair?
Shocking there. Yeah.
Tim Clooney and Arthur Pitt.
How'd you know?
Chester Pitts, a former
Chester Pitts
offensive lineman. Okay. Not mistaken there. So
I've
what
been
you do?
Then I would say yes, that's accurate.
You send a little selfie?
I did not send a selfie.
Oh, why?
Did the duck lips and the peace sign?
Isn't that what they were asking? We are available on the YouTube stream if you want to check out.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
There.
Plenty of places to see what we look like.
Social media, as well. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, it is a beautiful Wednesday here in Indy. Jake, this supposed souring on CJ Stroud, where do you think it comes from? Do you think it's smoke?
It's interesting because I hadn't really thought about it until I pointed this out to Stephen Holder. But Kevin, if there's increased chatter about the coachability of CJ Stroud, that means one of two things. Either A, let's say an agent for Anthony Richardson or Will Levis or whatever created that dialogue, or somebody in those camps did. The people that could most easily diffuse that would be the quarterbacks or head coaching staff at Ohio State University to say, no, he's wonderful. He's done everything we've asked. Been a great player. Or the more and the longer it goes that the narrative is out there that CJ Stroud is uncoachable, one would assume that narrative is coming from those assigned to coach him at Ohio State. And if that's the case, then I don't think it's in Ohio State's best interest to discuss that. Because we live in a world today in college athletics of athlete power. The athlete is the one with the power. The athlete is the one that holds all the cards for the most part, especially at the big times, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States, the Michigans. These athletes are looking, what can you do to get me to the league, right? And so maybe a 17-year-old kid doesn't have this kind of perception or foresight, but if it were me or my parents and I'm looking to go to a school and I'm choosing between Penn State, Ohio State, Florida, and USC, and I now see the possibility that the coaching staff of the most marketable player in this year's NFL draft out of Ohio State are publicly saying things that are limiting his value, I'm going to Penn State, Michigan, or USC, or whatever those other schools were that I mentioned. I can't see, Kevin, how it would be the Ohio State staff that is saying that about CJ Stroud. But who else could it be that would have any credibility other than those that coach him? They're the only ones that would be able to tell you how coachable he is, right?
Well, again, is it smokescreen season? Is it other teams saying, hey, CJ Stroud's not coachable because we want him to fall to us?
Yeah, understood.
I mean, if you're Ohio State, you look at it two ways.
But if I'm Ryan Day, I come out and say, I have no idea where this is coming from, but he is absolutely coachable.
Yeah, I guess if you're Ryan Day and you do have questions about his coachability and you have a desire to coach in the NFL, don't you want to be honest with NFL people?
Well, but what I'm saying, again,
and he still has a dozen guys getting drafted.
But what I'm saying is, if
for people to come to
when
Ohio
you
State.
say if there's smoke from teams that are hoping Stroud falls to them, that means that they are issuing a false narrative. If it's a false narrative, it's in Ryan Day's best interest to step forward and say, this is a false narrative. But Ryan Day, as the head football coach at Ohio State, when his biggest name in this year's draft is getting this percolating narrative that he's uncoachable, if it is untrue, it is in Ryan Day's best interest to maybe even just a tweet, send out a thing saying, we are thrilled for CJ Stroud and look forward to whoever has the pleasure next of coaching him.
Colts get on the clock at 4. Stroud, Richardson, Levis. Where do you think they'd go?
Stroud.
If it was just Richardson, Levis?
Levis.
Still going with Levis?
Yep.
It's interesting. The Levis stuff that I was hearing Colts related was all pre-Shane Steichen hire. So I am curious the Shane Steichen influence and what that would have on the quarterback decision. I mean, I'm a big believer that Shane Steichen needs to have heavy influence. I think he needs to have more say in this draft pick than Chris Ballard. That probably is a bit of wishful thinking, but that's how I would look at things. But I'll go back to what I said to Stephen Holder. Could I see Houston passing on quarterback and/or CJ Stroud to take Will Anderson? Sure. Some of it checks out. Again, I probably wouldn't do it, but I can get that. All right, I'm a defensive-minded head coach. I just came from having the Defensive Player of the Year on my D-line and Nick Bosa. Boom, I can get a player that could be a double-digit sack guy. And, maybe the next J.J. Watt type of talent for our franchise. The one that I can't really understand is Arizona sitting there at 3 and taking a player that is not a quarterback. You would think that they would just field the trade-up call. They're in a rebuild with a new GM. I don't think they're win now necessarily. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins supposedly is on the trade market. I get that Kyler Murray, has been in the league for several seasons now. But Arizona's the one where, don't you just think some quarterback needy team's going to trade up to 3 and take one of them? Like, who is the prospect that would go at 3 that's not a quarterback?
That's not a quarterback? Well, and this is depending on who goes at 2, right?
Well, assuming Will Anderson goes at 2. I don't think we've talked about any other non-quarterback.
Probably Carter, right?
Boy, would he go 3? I mean, is that too risky for a first-year GM?
What about the lineman from Northwestern?
No, I don't think he's been pegged anywhere that high.
I know, but he's the best lineman in the draft, right? So if somebody needs a lineman...
Yeah, but, I mean... Again, I don't think necessarily at 3. I think you could trade back to whatever, later in the top 10, potentially still get him. That to me is where it gets a bit confusing, in that all 3 quarterbacks would be on the board at 4.
If you're Arizona, I think Arizona, Kevin, I truly do think this is possible. So let me throw you something and you tell me how much you agree or disagree with it. Is it possible that Arizona thought they had a king's ransom sitting in their lap at number 3, and then as the evaluation process has gone along, teams that are quarterback needy have determined that this draft has no quarterback they can't live without?
When they were fielding some of those trade calls, don't you think a lot of teams were under the impression, though, CJ Stroud would be gone? And now CJ Stroud could be there? So don't you think those trade calls would be a little bit more enticing now?
Good point. But
I just don't. I guess coachability, I mean, certainly would factor in. But CJ Stroud's accuracy and what CJ Stroud did against Georgia.
You don't have to tell me. I mean, I love him as a player. We've been talking Levis, Richardson, and I've been saying that I thought Levis was going to be the guy for the Colts. But I think if Stroud's available, that's a game changer.
I mean, you could make the case, and I love Bryce Young. I would take Bryce Young ahead of CJ Stroud. But I could certainly hear people that would say CJ Stroud has the highest floor of any of these 4. I think that is a fair statement. And oftentimes, I think there's so much nervous energy surround taking a quarterback. Oh, he could bust, he could be terrible, this and that. I think with Stroud, you wouldn't have that. You'd feel pretty confident that he gives you a nice level, but more of the question, I guess, becomes, from a ceiling standpoint, how do you view that? Coming up in less than an hour, we're going to have Krysten Peek from Yahoo Sports join us, talk a little NBA draft. We'll get back into the Zach Edey discussion as well, as he is declared for the NBA draft, but maintaining the possibility that he returns to West Lafayette. A beautiful Wednesday here in Indianapolis. Kevin Bowen, Jay Query, and Mark Dykton right here on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Union Pacific Railroad wants you to join its team. It's an opportunity that comes with great pay and benefits.
Listening to Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Summer-like outside today on this Wednesday morning. Sounds like that'll be the case again tomorrow. Again, tonight we'll get Lakers, Grizzlies, Bucks, Heat, Nuggets, T-Wolves. Brought up earlier, I mean, I assume it's happened at some point in NBA history, but do you think a one seed has ever been down 2-0?
Allow me to look this up. Maybe I should have. Mark, what do we do on this program?
We educate and entertain.
Thank you.
And ice our feet when we trip over curbs.
Starting to get the feeling back a little bit here. We'll be back to normal by Friday. Probably trip over one tomorrow down there.
Here we go. The Chicago Bulls. My computer went on a smoke break there. In 2017, the Chicago Bulls became the second number 8 seed to go up 2-0 on a number 1 seed in playoff history. So I don't know if it's been done since 2017. The Bulls at that point went up 2-0 on Boston. And the last team to have done it prior to that were the 92-93 LA Lakers. Now, who would have been the 1 seed in the West in 1993? Would that have been not Utah?
Well, I'd say you can guess my age that year, but Lord knows you're not going to get that right.
3.5? Is that right?
The Rockets, Suns, Barkley with the Suns? I don't know.
Oh, Rockets is probably a good call. Or Suns, yeah. See?
I mean, huge one for the Bucks tonight, and we'll see if Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday can do the heavy lifting. Giannis doubtful with that lower back contusion.
Look at the big brain on Kevin. Phoenix, by the way, who came back to win 3-2 over the Lakers.
Gosh, that was 93. Back when it was best of 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, the best of 5 intrigue. You know, if Miami was up 1-0 right now, that pressure would feel a little different. I mean, there certainly still is pressure there based off the fact that this is a home game for the Bucks. You guys surprised the Bucks are favored by 6.5 with Giannis doubtful?
Boston came back to win 4-2 over Chicago, by the way. Milwaukee's got a nice team aside from Giannis, though. I mean, you saw what Drew Holiday did here, right?
Oh, he's outstanding.
I mean, they have guys that can carry them a little bit.
Lakers favored by 1.5 as they look to go up 2-0 on the road in Memphis tonight. We'll see about Ja Morant.
There are some fun matchups for certain, and it does feel fairly wide open. I mean, that's the intrigue of the NBA playoffs for certain, is the fact that
which is not an annual thing.
Correct. I was just going to say that is not always the case. But you have some kind of good young, when I say young, just different, I mean, you're used to the same old players. Now, I do think Boston's probably the best team in the league, but Denver's interesting because they're clearly really good and a front runner in the West, but do you really think of the Denver Nuggets as a team that could vie for, you know what I mean?
No, you're kind of waiting for, them to put it all together. Health has hurt them in years past with Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray as well. I do think getting back to Boston, when the trade happened, the Pacers needed to be done with Malcolm Brogdon, but I thought the fit there was so smart by Boston and Brad Stevens projecting Brogdon into their puzzle because they weren't asking him to start. They weren't asking him to play 35 minutes a night. That's what the Pacers were asking of Brogdon. They needed him to be out there night in, night out, being the catalyst, being the lead guy for them. He doesn't need to do that at all in Boston. He runs the second unit, can still be kind of that lead guy with that group, but they don't have pressure on him to play, first off, 82 nights out of the year, and more importantly, when he's out there, it's not like he's playing 38 or 40 minutes, and Brogdon has been able to stay healthy with a dialed-back role and is still able to do Brogdon-type things, which is a little bit of everything.
His tenure here was certainly complex, right? Thought he was a good player, but then again, is he an epicenter player? Then when they got rid of him, you thought, oh gosh, that's a big piece the Pacers are losing. I think Nesmith is a nice young piece, and then you get a guy like Halliburton, and you go, okay, that's the way that position should be anchored. But Brogdon as a complementary piece is darn good.
Yeah.
No doubt.
And the Pacers just projected him a little bit too much into too big of a role.
Very good way of saying it.
And honestly, I don't think physically his health history can handle some of that. We'll talk a little NBA draft to round things out. 9 o'clock hour coming up here. Kevin and Query.
And 107.5, The Fan.
Mark, do we have significance of this song other than I believe it was in American Pie?
No, not really. Every day is a good day to play an American Pie song.
It's a good song for the weather.
It is. That's a good way of saying it.
Good song for the weather we have right now. Jake, the year is 2030. Zach Edey playing in the NBA?
Well, Jake just aged about 7 years.
How many did I age? 17?
Happy 50th, Kev.
You'll be 35 in 2030, right? Is that right?
Yeah, something like that.
The year 2030.
2023 right now, for those that are just...
I'll say yeah.
Under a rock. I think Zach Edey can have a presence in the NBA, but I am beyond intrigued to see how it all looks. And, if he returns to Purdue, I think... Credit to Trayce Jackson-Davis and Mike Woodson for this. When Trayce Jackson-Davis flirted with the NBA each of the last 2 seasons, a question that I had when he got back to Bloomington was, how much is he going to try to play an NBA style? He's a great college basketball player. But how much was he going to try and kind of show off NBA sort of stuff in improving his draft stock? And Jake, he never really did that. Now, you could obviously have the question that maybe he's not necessarily capable of stretching the floor. That's fair. But I think oftentimes you see guys return to school. There is the promise or the hope of, hey, we're going to, put you into more situations that are going to prepare you for the next level, this and that. And again, Mike Woodson and Trayce Jackson-Davis never really did that. Purdue can be an outstanding basketball team with Zach Edey being the same Zach Edey he was last year. But if he went back to Purdue, would Zach Edey all of a sudden shoot 2 or 3 threes a game?
Like Thomas Bryant? Remember when Thomas Bryant came back to Indiana and all of a sudden that last year it was nothing but Thomas Bryant's last year at Indiana could be summed up with shooting a lot of threes to show that he could do so and then being part of a Tom Crean photo op for 20 minutes after the Carolina game.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a Thomas Bryant photo op, which, yeah, certainly went viral down in Bloomington there.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
He's had a nice NBA career.
NSFW, right? Not safe for work. That'd be accurate there. I saw he's a free agent. I think Thomas Bryant's going to make some money.
Yeah, he had a nice so far Thomas Bryant as a pro has been a nice serviceable player who also went viral with a photo when LeBron James was breaking the all-time NBA scoring record that he was like boxed out like 3 people down low, like, feed me. I'm open.
Phil Knight just sitting there stoic in the front row. Yeah, I mean, he is open. You might as well throw it.
That is a great photo.
Like, do you think Edey would all of a sudden shoot threes? I
think Edey probably – here's the thing. If Edey were to return to Purdue, I don't know that there's really much that could take place that would elevate his draft stock other than if he were to show a little bit of face to the basket mid-range game. I don't even know about 3-point game, but mid-range game, maybe that helps him a little bit. But I think people have a pretty good idea of who he is and what he would be doing. And he probably is a situational guy, Kevin. And by that I mean there are certain players that no matter what team takes them, they're going to get minutes. They're going to play because they can just, that's their game. There are other players that, Carl Landry was a really good player at Purdue. He was the best and one putback guy I've seen in college basketball in a long time. But he wasn't overly dynamic. He was kind of a rebounding machine for his size. And he got into the NBA and became a really nice player in the rotation for Sacramento because he was a situational guy, and that was the right situation for him. And the players around him, they said, get on the low block and get putbacks and get us 10 rebounds a game. That's what he did. To go on the way back here, it sounds weird, I realize, but Dean Garrett, who was the center at Indiana when they won it all in 87, a billion years ago, but he went to Europe for like 6 years, maybe even like longer than that, and then came back and Minnesota signed him, and he had a nice career with the Timberwolves well after he had come out of college. But again, it was situational. He had to be in the right situation for a team that knew what his limitation. Okay, you're a rim protector and you can get us some rebounds. And he played a long time doing that for Minnesota and had a good career. I think Zach Edey probably is a situational guy, Kevin. And the challenge with that sometimes is you're almost better off not getting drafted because then you can pick the situation as opposed to some team just takes a flyer on you and you go through their camp and you get released, and it's too late, and then next thing you know, you're in Europe, which is good money. Don't get me wrong, and then you try to come back and do the Dean Garrett route.
I think one of the more interesting things with Edey, again, he's so young in his basketball career that has to be enticing.
Right here, somebody just texted exactly this. Edey being in the infancy of his basketball development shows the likelihood that he will be able to adapt and continue to evolve at the next level. That's a good point, right?
And I guess the question I would have based off that, Jake, is just, okay, how would he adapt? All of a sudden, is he going to get a little bit more laterally quick and be able to switch on to guards? Because in college, if you want to, you can just plop Edey in the paint and he never has to leave it on the defensive end of the floor. Well, in the NBA, you can't do that with defensive 3 seconds. And you see that called on a pretty routine basis. So that would be a question. Offensively, I do think that he could have the ability to, step out and hit some sort of jump shot just based off a shooting stroke. I don't know if it's ever going to look like Brook Lopez, but that would be something that I'm very curious if he can tap into.
Give me a guy that is a college basketball player you thought had no chance in the NBA that's turned out to be a really good player. Or vice versa, a guy that you thought was going to be an absolute stud that nothing ever happened with.
Boy.
I thought Michael Kidd-Gilchrist out of Kentucky was going to be the best player in his draft.
Yeah.
I thought Jalen Suggs was going to be the best player in his draft.
Suggs would be high on the list. I love Suggs is a football player in high school. I just thought he'd focus more on playing basketball, and I thought he'd be a great player. I do think he shot a little better here in recent years.
How about Grayson Allen?
Didn't think he'd be that good, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, he's still got a role with the Bucks and everything.
Yeah.
He was
double
so
digits.
good in that national title game, though. It was like one of those things where could he just tap into the role? And he's in the perfect situation. I mean, that is the perfect situation for him there. Chris chimes in and goes, Zach Edey will have the same NBA career as Taco Fall.
Taco Falls actually looks pretty competent now, but it's in the G League, right? Or where is he now? He's either in the G League or actually it might be overseas. I think Edey has more natural athleticism than Taco Fall, though, right?
He plays for the Flying Tigers of the Chinese Basketball Association.
Stephon Marbury, the point guard there?
At least
Remember
selling
when,
shoes there.
Celtics fans chanted his name to get in, and Brad Stevens kind of did the whole Rudy thing, just kind of, all right, get in there for a game.
Is the Flying Tiger, that's like a griffin, right? Or is a griffin a flying lion?
I think you're thinking of Flying Lion.
There's a college sports team with a griffin.
It's in Michigan,
nickname,
right? I've always said this. Here's a weird question for you, Kevin. What is the most common animal that is not used as a mascot for any major college or professional sports team? Like the one that just no one uses. And you're like, why not?
For some reason, crocodile is popping in my head.
It's not bad. The Crocs, although, I mean, I guess you get the Gators, right? Gators is cool. And why are they not the Florida Alligators? Why are they just the Gators?
Too many syllables.
Yeah, that's probably right.
You'd think there'd be more snakes. There's obviously the diamond.
Yeah,
backs,
like the cobras,
the vipers, or
the vipers. Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, rattlesnakes would be a good one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, snake or spider? Which is your bigger fear?
Oh,
most people, it's one or the other.
Yeah,
snake,
easily snake. Yeah.
Yeah. Zero.
My brother-in-law currently has 100 mice in his attic.
Excuse me.
Well, you might want to.
What's this?
Snake in there.
What can you hold on? What's this?
Yeah, 100 mice in his attic.
Did he count them?
Went up there with some sort of Terminator and
Exterminator. You mean Exterminator?
Well, Exterminator trying to do the termination, I think was the hope there.
So how did they know? Did they just hear the little scurrying?
A little scurrying and some little droplings around the house.
So they're getting into the house.
Correct.
Well, if they're in the attic, I'd say they are in the house.
Yeah. Can you imagine open that up and seeing that?
They just fall on top of you.
Just the absolute horrifying scene that is.
Now, mice apparently are they're nasty little critters, whereas rats are actually very smart and affectionate, right? Rats get the bum rap. Because mice, people think mice are little cute things. They're conniving little SOBs. And rats are apparently fairly friendly and docile and intelligent, but they got the long tails and they live in New York City subways, so people think they're disgusting.
It from the sound of it, it's pretty expensive for such a removal.
I would say so. Triple digits.
Yeah.
Cost is rising.
No, you just get some of the little plastic traps. Now are mice smart enough though?
What, do you want 100 of them?
If you trap them,
imagine hearing all those sounds going off.
No. The little you get the humane ones, and then you take them out to the field and you let them go.
What are the humane ones?
They have
not the sticky ones. Those are the horrible.
No,
those are horrible.
Those are listen. I'm not sitting here trying to be PETA, but the glue boxes are awful because they say what you want about mice, but you don't want a poor thing sitting there and over the course of 10 days not able to move and just laying there dying a slow death. They have little plastic
there goes
ones.
Boo's chance to have any mice.
They have little plastic ones that when the mouse goes in and it's like a little crate and you take it out to the field and release it.
Boy, these Aero McLaren cars for the Indy 500, the looks of these cars are awesome.
Now, the Aero McLaren paint schemes Felix Rosenquist is going with one that is kind of the
Mark, head to their Twitter
Marlboro.
account and give that the old retweet.
Rosenquist is going with kind of the retro Marlboro paint scheme look. Rossi and Pato. Is Rossi's kind of a silver?
Yeah, well, let me look up the identification. I want to make sure I have the right ones for each one.
I will tell you from a broadcast standpoint.
And Tony Kanaan's with them, right, for the 500?
Correct. Kanaan is as well. From a broadcast standpoint.
Oh, boy. Do you not love it?
No. I just want. Sometimes teams, they have cars that look identical, and then you're like, okay, I just need. Kanaan's car looks very similar to Pato's, I think. So you need something to be able to identify the difference as they're coming at you, because you're like, wait a minute. So every once in a while there will be two cars that look exactly the same, and you're like, those two just need to make sure that they are not next to each other on the racetrack, please, from a broadcast standpoint.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about their paint schemes, but they just stand out.
It's the papaya orange.
I like the blue.
The blue's cool, too. They have kind of a baby blue that's really cool.
Do you call that matte black or no?
I think matte black is fair, right? Pato Award, I'm telling you. For those that are unfamiliar, Pato Award is really good.
Hell, he could have won it last year. So Pato is going to go with the primarily black on his car. Rosenquist has got a little bit of white with the orange.
Correct.
Rossi is orange, a little bit of blue trim. And then Kanaan.
It's black with orange stars on it. Or like one big orange star from above.
It's a great look.
And I believe that's tribute to Lone Star JR, who was a big driver for McLaren. McLaren is a historic team. I mean, it's very cool.
And now they're buying, did I read this correctly? They're buying Andretti's old headquarters, and Andretti's going to go in by the Fishers Airport?
You did read both those things correct, yes. By the way, R.C. Enerson, since you asked the other day, Kevin, as we get set for the month of May, they're theoretically, assuming that there are no issues with anybody, there will be bumping because we now have at least 34 cars. Able Motorsports getting an entry for R.C. Enerson, is a young driver out of Florida that has attempted to make the show in the past. The one thing that you can never rule out the possibility towards, I hate to say it, whenever it comes to the month of May, there are always two things that can come into play. There's always one team that you expect that's always around that for whatever reason they just completely missed the mark. They're just totally out to lunch. The setups weren't right, or the engineering wasn't right.
Will Power almost didn't qualify?
Power's a good one. Kanaan's had it happen to him and starting the back row. Hunter Ray had it happen one year. I mean, you never know. The other thing that can happen, of course, is that, and you hope it doesn't, but in practice or in qualifying, either one, someone has an incident where they are not medically cleared in the immediacy to be able to drive, and then the team just has to scrap that car, or they don't have a backup or whatever else. So a lot can go into play. A lot.
Should the Colts take a chance on Trey Lance?
Why not? I mean, what was the injury?
What was it? Was it ankle or foot? He has started just 4 games in his NFL career. I mean, not a lot, to be totally honest, in those 4 starts. 54% passer. You don't love that. 5 touchdowns, 3 picks. But with them going with Brock Purdy, I am curious, what you could do from a trade standpoint. What that would look like.
I mean, Purdy's coming off injury also, though. You know what I mean?
Ian Rappaport just tweeted, the 49ers have received inquiries from several teams looking into a potential trade for Trey Lance. The conversations have been the result of San Francisco fielding the calls, not making them, with teams aware that Brock Purdy is likely the future starter. It would be risky, and obviously any quarterback.
Lance is fascinating, Kevin, because clearly San Francisco did believe in him and believed that their weight was worth it because they elevated him into that position. But then he got hurt, and you don't really know what you have, right? I don't know that San Francisco knows what they have. And the same is true. Here's another question. Yesterday, I'm out shopping, and guy behind me, nice guy.
Oh, what are you shopping for?
What's that?
What are you shopping for?
Shoes for the mini.
Okay.
And so, guy behind me in line wearing a Patriots jacket.
Oh.
Nice guy, older guy. And I said, so you a Patriots fan or you just have the jacket? Oh, no, I'm a big fan. So we're talking for a second about the AFC East. And I said, then you got the Jets that who knows what they're going to do this year. And he said, yeah, why does everybody just assume automatically there's a slam dunk that Aaron Rodgers is their quarterback? That's kind of like stalled. And I'm like, I agree. I mean, where does Zava end up, right? I mean, does he go there? Does he stay in Green Bay? That the Green Bay relationship appears totally over with, but then what do they get for him? Where does he go?
NFL Network reporting that the Falcons are hosting CJ Stroud on a visit today. Of note there, Atlanta holding the 8th overall pick. Kind of to the earlier discussion we were having, Jake, I just cannot see Arizona not having some trade calls for them at 3. I mean, if you look at the teams, we've been discussing this for several months now, but if you look at the teams right behind Indianapolis at 4, whether it's Seattle at 5, the Lions at 6, the Raiders at 7, the Falcons at 8, go to Tennessee at 11, all of them have long-term quarterback questions to varying degrees. Atlanta, I mean, are you gung-ho on Desmond Ridder? CJ Stroud gets to 3?
Ritter's another one, Kevin. Do they know what they have there?
But it's not like you took him that high, Jake, to where you made the indication that you thought he was unquestionably your franchise QB.
Right.
I am curious if the Colts, and again, Shane Steichen's influence on this, if there would be a little bit more pro Anthony Richardson than Will Levis. I think a lot of the Will Levis chatter, at least from my side of it, was pre-Steichen arrival. And I'm curious if those two are on the board and it's an either or there, if they would side with Richardson.
Well, what's the patch on your shirt, on your left sleeve?
Oh, Titleist.
Okay. It looks like, for a split second there, it looked like maybe you were getting ready to do an oil change.
Oh, I could see that. By the way, I know it's a different location, but for someone that used to live on Browse Avenue, 58th and Browse, I'm disappointed to see Keystone Sports Review moving north.
Moving north to Birdie's. I love KSR, by the way. Larry is the best.
We posted up at KSR for a lot of Sundays in there. Gosh, what was the bartender's name? We loved her. I don't know if she
Jen
felt that great about us, to be fully transparent, but yeah.
Great wings, fabulous pizza.
Sounds like they want to be in a little bit of a bigger environment.
Yeah, they're moving up to the location at 71st and Keystone.
But there's some sort of oil-ish store, oil change store going in at the KSR location.
I think that's right.
So maybe I should work there.
That's right, with your shirt there, right? Why not?
Speaking of oil changes,
What's
Jiffy
the
Lube.
curb, sir?
Jiffy Lube oil change coming up for the pop quiz at 9:30. Let's do a morning checkdown.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Been a while. We've talked about it a couple of times, Kevin. What exactly is Zach Edey going to do? Do we have any news? Yesterday we got our answer.
Yeah, so declaring for the NBA draft, still maintaining eligibility to return for Purdue. I think important dates now moving forward. I think it's May 16th is the NBA draft combine. If you remember last year, Trayce Jackson-Davis got COVID right before the combine started. That certainly could have impacted maybe how he viewed himself in the NBA and versus returning to Bloomington. May 31st then is the deadline for those players to head back to their respective colleges. So those will be the big dates to watch for Zach Edey. Yesterday, Matt Painter was on with JMV, per usual, outstanding from Painter on a variety of topics. Here was the Zach Edey related chatter.
He's still, trying to gather a lot of facts and kind of figure out where he stands with everything. I just want him to do what's best for him. I think a lot of people always look at it like the head coach is just trying to convince you to come back. And, I look at it like I wish I was in his position. And, I just want, for him to make the best decision for himself, gather all the facts and make that decision, and then support him in whatever he does. If he decides to go to the NBA, support him. If he comes back to Purdue, support him. Like just continue to help your players, continue to want what's best for them.
See, that's the kind of thing a coach should say, as opposed to, and I'm not saying it's Ohio State that said it, but with CJ Stroud, the narrative that he's uncoachable. Coach should be pumping his guys up, try to get them drafted, and it looks good for the program.
Are you on the Greg Doyle train of if Zach Edey goes pro, they're still a top 10 team? I cannot go there.
I would agree with you. I don't think the drop-off is as big as people think it will be, not because of Zach Edey, but because I think they do have really good players down low, Kaufman-Wren and First, and I think they're going to have the ability to make up some of that and maybe just alter the way they play a little bit. But yeah, the National Player of the Year leaves. There's going to be some stylistic change for certain. So 10-20, I'd say. Major League Baseball yesterday, Diamondbacks over the Cards 8-7. It was the Rays over the Reds 10-0. White Sox and Philadelphia Phillies splitting a doubleheader. The Cubs over the Athletics 4-love. Detroit sweeping Cleveland in a doubleheader. The Baltimore Orioles over Washington 1-0. And the Indianapolis Indians 5-4 losers to the Memphis Redbirds.
Last night in the NBA, all the home teams won. Celtics controlled the Hawks. Malcolm Brogdon pretty good off the bench. Speaking of former Pacers, Karis LeVert really good off the bench for Cleveland. Darius Garland as well. Donovan Mitchell kind of more of a facilitator for them.
13 assists for Mitchell.
Yeah, that's a big number for him. Cavs thumped the Knicks there to even up that series at 1-1. And then in the nightcap, Devin Booker, was it 38 for him?
Yep.
It was a big night for Devin Booker as the Suns even up that series. Looking ahead to tonight, you have the unusual first game of the night is a Western Conference game. Guess that's what happens when Memphis is the home team. That'll be a 7:30 tip on TNT. Our coverage will be here on the Fan as well. The Grizzlies, slight underdog with Ja Morant's situation up in the air. They are down 1-0 in that series. Then at 9 o'clock, so a late start for the Central Time Zone, you'll have the Bucks hosting the Heat, trying to even up that series. Again, Giannis Antetokounmpo is doubtful with that lower back contusion, so that will be a big storyline. And then the final game of the night will be in the altitude, Denver looking to go up 2-0 on the T-Wolves. And Draymond Green, suspended for Game 3. The NBA announced that late last night and made it very clear in the press release issued by a former bad boy in Joe Dumars, saying that Draymond Green's past history impacted this decision.
And probably his taunting of the entire situation when it happened, right?
With Adam Silver in attendance, by the way.
239-1070 is our telephone number. The pop quiz is next. There's a chance at a Jiffy Lube oil change. I've not looked at the pop quiz yesterday. I thought very manageable.
Yeah, I'm scanning through it right now. I don't know. Probably no. Probably
Really?
no. Yeah.
Which question do you think I'll have the most trouble with?
4, 5. Well,
no, four. I would say.
Yeah, 4 for sure. I don't think 1 and 5 are slam dunks. And honestly, I mean 2 isn't either.
Oh, I mean 4.
We haven't mentioned 2 at all throughout the show.
4.
Gosh, when I
by the
look
way,
at 3,
4 will be tough. 4 will definitely be tough.
Number 3 here, didn't Delonte West, didn't he have a thing with LeBron's mom? Is that ever true?
Supposedly. Delonte West, by the way, I had a friend that worked for the Seattle Sonics and then later the Oklahoma City Thunder. Delonte West started his career, I believe, with the Sonics, and has had terribly and tragically a lot of mental health issue. But when Delonte West, they had assigned parking spots for each player on the roster, and my buddy said he'd go to work every morning, and there in the parking lot, it's like there's Kevin Durant's, BMW, and there's so-and-so, Ray Allen's Lamborghini, whatever, and then in Delonte West's parking spot was a 10-speed bike, a Schwinn 10-speed bike with the kickstand down, parked right there in his parking spot.
Gosh, the pictures of Delonte West, just
sad.
Tough to see here in recent years. All right, pop quiz next.
on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan. Have you studied? Can you handle the pressure? Sharpen your pencils. It's time for the Pop Quiz with Kevin and Query. Brought to you by Jiffy Lube, Indiana's favorite oil change since 1985.
We're going to talk a little NBA draft coming up, so we probably should be relatively brisk with the Pop Quiz, right?
Yeah, that's probably a good plan. Number 1 through 8?
I'll go with number... Never do 5. Go with 5.
Number 5 is who, Mark?
Tom.
Tom.
Good morning.
Tom, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Tom, will you be able to enjoy this day outside at all?
I intend to.
In what type of activity, if you don't mind?
I'm not sure yet. I haven't talked to my boys.
Throwing the ball in the backyard? Park action?
Just something outside.
Now, Tom, when you say your boys, do you mean your sons or the guys you hang out with?
The guys I hang out with.
Oh.
Gotcha. Okay. How old a fella are you, Tom?
63.
63-year-old Tom. Are you a retiree?
I am.
And what line of work were you in?
Investment banking.
Oh, okay. So now
You're too smart for this.
Yeah, I was going to say you've probably been retired for like 10 years, right?
Yes.
Tom, you own property in how many different areas of the country?
Just my house.
Okay, fair enough. Last question for you, Tom. You went to school. The last school you attended was which school?
IU.
Okay. So this is Tom, who graduated from IU, I'm guessing somewhere like right around the 81 championship team, right? Probably right after that?
That was my senior year.
Okay.
Did you jump in the fountain?
Prior to that, I was Kevin's cathedral prior to that. So.
Oh, nice.
All right. Here we go. Would you like for me or would you like for your Irish brethren, Kevin Bowen, to lead you off with question number 1?
Kevin.
Okay.
You know, it's called it Kevin's Cathedral. So thank you, Tom, for the ego check for me here on this Wednesday morning. All right, the home team that won its NHL Stanley Cup Playoff opener last night. A, the Devils, B, the Avalanche, C, the Knights, or D, all home teams lost last night?
All home teams lost.
Okay, question number 2 for you. Name the Major League pitcher who picked up his 200th career win last night. Was it Clayton Kershaw? Bingo, man.
Investment banking right here. Tom, let's go. All right, number 3 here. Darius Garland. Tom scored 32 to lead the Cavs past the Knicks last night to even their playoff series at a game apiece. Garland had 26 points at the half and is just the third Cavalier over the past 25 years to record 25 or more points in a half of a playoff game. LeBron James is one. The other was Sean Kemp, Delonte West, Kyrie Irving, or Kevin Love?
Well, since I was listening earlier, Delonte West.
Okay.
It's more of just, to be totally transparent, Tom, that was more of just intrigue over the name, not necessarily the correct answer, if you would like another.
Can I get the answers again?
Sean Kemp, Delonte West, Kyrie Irving, or Kevin Love?
I will guess Kyrie. I don't know.
Okay. Question number 4 for you, Tom. True or false, people should be skeptical of Bitcoin?
True.
Actually, question number 4 for you, Tom. The first Boston Marathon was held on this date. In what year did the first Boston Marathon take place? And I will tell you that it was 14 years before the first Indianapolis 500. Was it 1893, 1897, 1900, or 1906?
1897.
Mark over there is getting a little squirmy. Did you know that, Tom?
When he said 14 years before.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Number 5 here with no hints. On this day in 1956, the first Major League Baseball game to be played in New Jersey took place. Who was the home team for the game played at Roosevelt Stadium in Jersey City? A, the New York Giants, B, the New York Yankees, C, the Brooklyn Dodgers, or D, the Philadelphia Phillies?
Phillies. That's a guess.
Phillies is the guess from Tom. Tom, curious, like when you and your boys get together to take part in outdoor activities, what are those?
Golf.
You're playing golf and you're going to like it.
Your favorite golf course in the city of Indianapolis and surrounding counties?
Oh, I don't know. I've played a lot of them.
What a grueling question.
Well, I used to play Wolf Run a lot. And that was not favorite because it's hard.
What about Bear Slide? Isn't there a course called Bear Slide?
Great price tag there for a good golf course.
That's a great golf course. It's also in a different universe.
Yeah. Yep. You got to head up to 236, right? 236th Street up there off 31. All right, Tom. Unbelievable. Jake, he got the first 4 right, correct?
Yeah. He did. All the home teams lost last night. It was Clayton Kershaw, Kyrie Irving, and 1897. Question 5, though, is where the Bitcoin slipped in, right? Like, it was kind of tricky, and you didn't know which way to go with it. Brooklyn Dodgers was actually the correct answer.
You blew it! Thank you, Tom.
Solid effort, Tom.
Go Irish.
That's right.
How about that golf question? You would have thought I was asking him, it was thoughts
the
on
Social Security number.
Yeah, political views there. Krysten Peek, Talk NBA Draft to round it out.
on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Now, Kevin, I'm pretty certain it's Gary. We need to ask her about Gary.
Oh, on the canine front?
I think it was Gary. I hope Gary's still around. Not significant other, but the Kristen's dog, I believe,
correct,
is Gary.
Yeah. On top of the draft coverage that was outstanding, I did think Gary was barking in the background last year. Krysten Peek, are we totally off base on that, or do you have a dog named Gary?
I do indeed have a dog named Gary. He's actually quite infamous in the NBA scout executive circle. Every time I see an NBA scout on the road, it's, oh, how's it going? Did you get in okay? Where were you? How's Gary?
Yeah, we don't want to talk, Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller. We were talking about Gary.
That's right. Gary's cool. What kind of dog is Gary?
He's a Cavapoo, so half Cavalier, King Charles Spaniel, half Poodle. Yeah. He's like sitting, looking out the window, trying to find birds right now. So
Gary's got the life, right? Gary's got the life.
I know.
Hell of a way to start a Wednesday morning.
Krysten, I want to begin with this, and thank you for your time, by the way. Krysten Peek of Yahoo Sports joins us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline to talk NBA draft. The Indiana Pacers, we know, they're going to be in the lottery to try to get themselves into the top 4. Realistically, in this year's draft, to get a transcendent franchise-level player, a team needs to be picking within how many of the top pick?
Transcending franchise player, I would say 2.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, and when people are, I know I made the case for Brandon Miller at number 2, but that was more of a fit for a team that's looking for more length and shooting other than playmaking and speed in terms of what Scoot Henderson brings.
Well, I feel like Brandon Miller actually is designed more for what in other words, I don't think Brandon Miller, I think it's very clear that Wembanyama and you tell me if I'm wrong on this, and Scoot Henderson are your top 2, unless Indiana, for example, sneaks into 2, because I could see them taking Brandon Miller because they desperately need wing length more than they need dynamic guard play.
Exactly. I mean, Indiana is a team that would take a look at Brandon Miller. I also think Houston with Jalen Green and also Kevin Porter Jr. there already kind of locked in at the guard position would take a look at Brandon Miller, possibly even Detroit, even though I think you could move Cade to the 2 and just kind of go back and forth between Jaden Ivey and Scoot Henderson. Even though they're very similar players, they also might take a look at Brandon Miller. So, 2 is where it gets interesting. And this draft lottery, I cannot wait for it on May 16th in the sense where there's going to be one team that is elated and knowing that this could possibly change their entire franchise in the future of what direction they're going. And then you're going to have 2 or 3 other teams that are just like, okay, now what? That was a good run. Now what do we do? And then also at 10, seeing as Dallas and what they did the last 2 weeks of the season, if that pays off and they keep their pick inside the top 10, or if they fall to 11 and the Knicks get the pick. So I cannot wait for this draft lottery night here in less than a month now.
Yes, 7th. That's where the Pacers are in the lottery standings. Again, the mother of Gary, NBA Draft Insight, Krysten Peek, joining us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Krysten, as I look at the Pacers, obviously they could go 1, 2, 3, 4. More likely, kind of 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that range. When you're talking that range, in my opinion, considering how poor this team was on the defensive end of the floor this year, that should be a bit of the focus, kind of in that wing for, sort of position as well. If you're talking about defensive-minded guys, could you give us a few names to watch that could be in that area?
Yep. Yeah, there's 2 players. One, which is kind of sneaking up further, the closer we get to the draft. I'll start with one who's kind of been consistently in that range. And I just saw him in Houston for the Final Four. I saw him work out. Jarris Walker, the Houston forward who, when you're talking about defensive versatility, he has it. And he's someone who already has an NBA-ready body at 6'8", 240 pounds, did not look like a freshman this year in the way that he was banging down low, and his footwork is so good off the block. He doesn't necessarily have that game extended past the three-point line yet, but he's a good enough spot-up shooter where I think that's something that he could develop to. But when we're talking defensive versatility, I mean, he can slide with the guard off the switch. He obviously has the size to bang down low with some of the bigger players. So I think that's one player that the Pacers will probably try to target. And then another player that a lot of teams are really high on is Taylor Hendricks from UCF, Central Florida, who kind of came out of nowhere this season. 6'9", 210. When we look at that 3-and-D position and that positionless basketball that Scotty Barnes has started to, kind of create in terms of with size, they're kind of the similar size, but with Taylor, I mean, he is so good defensively, and he can shoot it a little bit better as well. So that's another player that a lot of teams are looking at and starting to hone in on further up the lottery. So at 6, 7, 8, those two players are two players that I think that the Pacers will probably try to target.
Okay, 3 players of local interest from a collegiate standpoint, Krysten Peek, that I want to ask you about. We will begin with the one that probably hears his name first, and that's Jalen Hood-Schifino out of Indiana.
Yep.
Probably, mid-teens? Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I mean, he finished the season strong. He was dealing with a lower back injury, that was just kind of like pestering him a little bit in the beginning of the season. So it took him a little bit to kind of get into the chemistry with the rest of the guards. But, the 1-2 guard forward playmaking that he had with Trayce Jackson-Davis to close out the season really gave NBA teams a good indication of what he can be as that lead ball handler and the way he reads the pick and roll, because that's all the game is, the NBA level, a lot of it with the spacing and the reads off that offense. So, and he can make 3-point jump shots. And I saw him at the Chris Paul camp last summer, and he was locking down Devin Booker and Chris Paul, and Chris Paul was like, man, he's tough. He's going to be tough in the league. So when we're looking for that defensive mindset in the league and someone that can guard consistently the 1 and the 2, Jalen Hood-Schifino has, and I think that's why he could possibly sneak into the lottery. But yeah, that team spot is where he's at.
Okay, Trayce Jackson-Davis, probably early second, safe to say?
I would say early second. It always goes with fit. I could see a team taking him at that 28, 29, 30 just to add a little more experience. He's a plug-and-play guy, a little bit older. I want to say that his footwork got a lot better from last year to this year. And, we saw him a little bit more consistent down the stretch. But, yeah, he definitely has every time he went back, he got better. And that's what NBA teams want to see, is not a player plateauing. They always want to see someone getting a little bit better. And that's what Trayce did.
Can teams see something from a player after the season is over? In other words, Krysten, with Trayce Jackson-Davis, there was a lot of narrative of he hasn't shown enough that he can play facing the basket or that he can score in the mid-range or on the wing. And Trayce Jackson-Davis, I think, would contend, well, I didn't have to do that at Indiana,
right.
So that doesn't mean I can't. If he does it like just in workouts and camps, is that enough to sell teams, or are they still going to say, look, we had to see it in actual game action?
No, absolutely. I mean, every year at the NBA Draft Combine, we see 1 or 2 players that make themselves millions of dollars. We saw it last year with Jalen Williams, who was from Santa Clara, and he played his way into a lottery pick and was very, very effective as a rookie for Oklahoma City Thunder. So those games, those scrimmages at the Draft Combine really do matter, and teams really do take into consideration if there's a player that elevates their game far above everyone else, or if they see something. David Roddy from Colorado State was another player, that kind of played his way into a first-round pick last year, and now is with the Memphis Grizzlies. So there is still time. Teams have not made up their decision yet, by far. By far, they're far from it.
Again, Krysten Peek with us, Yahoo Sports, rounding out that trio of locals. We'll see if he keeps his name in the draft. But Zach Edey from Purdue, obviously, Krysten, dominant in college basketball last season. Body types like him are super unique. His fit in the NBA will be very fascinating to see whenever that happens. Early talks, what have you heard, Zach Edey potentially at the next level?
I mean, it's so interesting with a player like Zach Edey, just because his size, like you said, he's so unique. Do I think that there's a place for him? Yes. Do I think it's necessarily on a rotational NBA roster? I don't think right away. I think he's going to have to develop a little bit more of an NBA game and pace and get a little bit more better footwork, especially speed, because they're going to target him defensively, right? And he can't just pack in the lane. I mean, he can, but I think it helps that Luka Garza has found success at the NBA level because everyone was saying, oh, he's not an NBA player. He's not an NBA player. Even Taco Fall, for a couple seasons with Boston, he found a little bit of success. So I do think that there is a place for him. I don't know if he'll get drafted. If he will, it'll be at the back half of the second round. But yeah, just in terms of what he can bring and his skill set is so unique, I think there is a team that would take a chance.
Where are we at on the Brandon Miller off the court front? Like when you have talked with NBA teams, their level of concern with Brandon Miller off the floor is where?
I mean, you have to remember that NBA teams also have teams of lawyers that dove, so much deeper than we have into this case. So they're doing their own due diligence. They're doing their own background and research. Brandon Miller's probably only going to talk to 3 teams. And look, it's going to be one of those sessions. He's going to have to answer a lot of hard questions. But because he's projected so high, it's not going to have to be 5, 6, 7 teams. His agent and his team, they're going to be very selective as to, after the draft lottery, who he talks to. But he is going to have to sit and answer a lot of questions as to why he was there, why he was mentioned, what was his part, how does this affect his character moving forward, and everything like that. Because, and then right after that, the thing with John Moran, I mean, I think the NBA is really taking this sort of thing very seriously, and he is going to have to answer about where he's at right now. I don't know in terms of the trial, like what he's going to do, if the defense team is going to try to, the prosecution is going to try to get him as a witness, or I don't know any of those details yet, but the NBA is just doing their due diligence and scouting him, who he is as a player on the court, which he, after the news broke, he had 41 points in the game winner against South Carolina, but also he's going to have to answer for himself of his involvement off the court.
Well, I'll tell you what, in the latter part of the season, the last month or so, especially the NCAA tournament, Brandon Miller's shooting absolutely went south. I mean, it was
tournament.
abysmal.
He was awful.
Yeah, he was bad in the tournament.
Yes.
But that doesn't hurt him, though, right? I hate to say that, but, I mean, don't they basically draft – I mean, we have seen the potential, right? And, enough body of work was displayed, correct?
Absolutely, yes. And I know NBA fans probably just tuned into the tournament, and they're like, this is a top 3 pick. He went scoreless in the first game and I think he shot only 22% from 3 the other 2 games and wasn't really effective or productive offensively. And the thing is yes, they look at the full body of work, and also he's only 20 years old, so they're looking at the upside and potential. And defensively, I mean, there was a game against Auburn late in the season. They were down at home by 15, 16 points, and it was Brandon Miller's defense that turned it into offense that really turned the game around, and they came back and won the game. So teams really look at the complete body of work and not necessarily just what he does on a big stage like the NCAA tournament.
Again, it's at Krysten Peek. That's KRYSTENPEEK on Twitter. Yahoo Sports. The Combine less than a month away. Lottery right around that time. And the draft coming up on June 22nd.
Hey, what breed is Gary again? I'm going to look this up.
He's a Cavapoo. Cavapoo.
He's behaved tremendously by all accounts here over the last 10, 15 minutes.
He's sleeping. I know. He's not. I can't remember what time we talked last time, but I knew I was getting on with you guys, so I gave him a treat. Be like, okay.
So Gary's a point guard. He's a little guy, right?
He's 18, 19 pounds. And hey, listen, his mother just had another litter of puppies. If anybody's interested, you hit me up on Twitter because they're super cute. And the family from Utah, they will bring you the puppy nationwide. They go all over.
Wow. So if you want your own version of Scoot Henderson,
that's right.
Krysten Peek right now on Twitter, correct?
Yes.
I love it. Krysten, great stuff. Right now, NFL draft centric here in this market, but it's another big one for the Pacers. We appreciate the insight you provided.
It would actually be more like John Stockton. It's a point guard out of Utah.
This
Kevin,
time.
come on.
Certainly on that front. Krysten, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
That's Krysten Peek right there on the Payless Liquors hotline. Seeing an interesting note with the NBA yesterday. that they could be inviting all prospects moving forward to the NBA Draft Combine. The NFL Combine couldn't be more different than the NBA Combine.
Did you see that they also, I can't remember which one I was reading about, that they didn't invite to the draft because they don't want anybody sitting in the green room with that awkward, like, you know what I mean? They're only inviting, like, a limited number of players, apparently.
The NFL?
I thought it was NBA I read that about.
Oh, wow. 2 months in advance, they're already doing that?
Or was it NFL? There was a player that I read that, like, it was, oh, I know who it was. It was NFL, you're right. It was the receiver out of TCU.
He's not going?
Correct, because they're afraid that he's going to slide too much.
Yeah, I saw Drew Rosenhaus like, yeah, I'm sending Jalen Carter. I think he's going to go in the top 10. Thank you not only to Krysten Peek, Stephen Holder, Alan Karpick as well. Everybody enjoy this gorgeous Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow right here on Kevin and Court.